Thank you. Okay, the September 20 board meeting of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District is reconvening at 7:20 p.m. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There are no reportable actions from our closed session this evening, so I have nothing to report back at this time. And we'll proceed then to public comment number 2. If anybody from the public would like to address the board on an item that is not on our agenda this evening, this is the time to do so.
And you can do so by raising your hand. Use the raise hand feature, or you can press *9 if you called in. And seeing none, Director Bernstein, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. Chief, the first item here is your report.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Bernstein, board members, members of the public, and members of our department. This report, just to kind of give you an update on our COVID numbers. Again, I mean, we're seeing a general decline. We get upticks here and there. Right now, we have one member that's out currently. We're not seeing any significant impacts to our levels of services, primarily with the ambulance providers. So no increase of wall times, no degradation of service. So that's good in that respect. Other items, quite a few things going on since we last met. Just a quick update on our Fire Station 4. As with any construction project, nothing ever finishes quite on time. This is no exception. We now have a report from our contractor that we're looking at occupancy towards the end of November. That's when the folks will move in from the house behind the station and into the station. Once they do that, they'll do the demolition of the house and finish everything up. And they're looking for hopefully a final completion in March of 2023. And we will schedule a grand opening shortly thereafter. But obviously each month when I report back to you, the dates change slightly, so stay tuned. But that's our hope, fingers crossed. Hopefully in April of 2023, we'll invite the public in to see our beautiful fire station. Other things that have going on, I just attended the ADAPT annual training. It was in Holbrook Palmer Park in Atherton. That was on Saturday, September 10th. Nice, was a little bit different this year than a big drill. They set up a number of different stations just where people could do some fire extinguisher training, learn how to turn off their gas, refresher stuff. So it was a good event. And then Sunday after that, on September 11th, we had our annual 9/11 Memorial Mass, where we honored our members that have died in the line of duty, usually from job-related illnesses, and then those that have passed away over the last year. We honored 5 of our members, Captain Brian Dixon, Division Chief Rich Hall, and Engineer Leroy Pitlock, all who passed away from job-related cancers, I believe. And then just this past year, retired Captain Jim Goldman and Peter Moots, who is known as Photo One, also passed away. So that was a nice ceremony there at the university in Belmont. Fire Prevention Week is coming up in October, and we are going to celebrate Fire Prevention Week by having an open house on Saturday, October 8th at Station 6 from 1 to 3 p.m. We're going to open up the museum, give tours. There's going to be some opportunities, I think, for folks to ride on one of our old fire trucks right around there, or hop on it, I should say. And I know there's going to be some auctions and things going on also, like fire chief of the day, fire captain for the day, some station dinner, some things like that to raise some funds. So that'll be good.
Wait, what time is that, Chief?
Oh, from 1 to 3 p.m. on October 8th at Station 6.
Thank you.
Sure. The Colorado Springs Memorial, I, along with some members of our honor guard, attended the memorial in Colorado Springs just this past weekend. We intended to add the name of Captain Brian Dixon, who passed away from job-related cancer. And so we added his name along with 468 other names to the memorial. And that's a memorial that recognizes line of duty deaths for firefighters, professional firefighters in the United States and Canada. It had been a catch-up year since they had not had the services for 2 years due to COVID, but it was attended by over 8,000 people. So it was just a spectacular, wonderful event, a nice way to pay tribute to those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice by giving their lives in the line of duty. We have a department golf tournament. It's an annual tournament that's coming up on Monday, October 10th at Spring Valley Golf Resort in Milpitas. I know that I notified the board about Chief Manny Navarro's pending retirement. I don't know that others are aware. So Manny Navarro, who's current and acting deputy chief right now, has been with us for over a decade and been in the fire service for well over 50 years. Has announced that he'll be retiring from the Menlo Park Fire District at the end of December. So stay tuned. We'll look for a way where we can appropriately honor Manny's aids of service to the community. Though it's not on there, I just added this one. Division Chief John Johnston and I did a presentation yesterday at the Allied Arts Center to the Daughters of the American Revolution. It was a presentation basically on fire safety preparedness, mostly for wildland fires, teaching them about zone haven and how to do some home hardening. Really well received, lots of questions, but it was really great. We are also pleased to announce, and I know we've shared with the board, that we've hired a finance manager. His name is Elaine Malari. He will be starting on Monday, October 3rd. Elaine comes to us from the city of San Jose. He's currently in the Department of Economic Development there. He's a certified public accountant who spent some time with, I think, Ernst & Young, broad background in corporate finance, audit, accounting, budgets. So we feel really fortunate to have him and excited to add him to our team. Incidents. We didn't have any significant incidents in our district, so to speak, but we did support the state of California and the mission of Cal OES by sending an engine up to the mosquito fire outside of Sacramento, kind of up in the Auburn Hills. That was earlier, that was probably about a week and a half ago that they were dispatched up there. And then surprisingly, while that fire was burning, a weather system, a tropical storm, moved in through Southern California. So Cal OES asked us to stand up our Swiftwater rescue team and pre-deploy them down in Riverside County to deal with some burn scars in some areas. So we deployed a 6-member team down there. Fortunately, they were not needed and they got returned back pretty quickly. There was still some mud and debris flows down in Riverside County as a result of those rains, but there was no need for help from our folks. Both of those incidents are fully reimbursable through Cal OES. So one other thing that I'll just mention, and I believe all the board members received it, is we had a Cpr Save. So I'll just recognize the good work of our folks out in the field. This occurred, we had a 54-year-old female that was found in a room in cardiac arrest, and our firefighters and paramedics from Engine 6 initially responded. We also had Engine 4 come in and assist. They were able to perform CPR, apply shocks with our defibrillator, administer intravenous drugs. They took her to the hospital and were able to regain pulses, and she walked out of the hospital one week later. So that's just a really wonderful success story. So happy to share that with you. The only other thing that I will bring up is just a reminder that we have a joint meeting coming up with the City of Menlo Park. I'll let Director Corrali address that during her liaison reports. With that, that is the end of my chief's report. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions on the chief's report? Okay. Any public comment or public questions on the chief's report? You don't see anything, do you, Michelle?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief. Okay, we'll move to our consent calendar. Item 2, which is approval of several sets of minutes. Item 3 is to accept the treasurer's report, and item 4 is to approve a resolution for continued remote meetings. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent calendar? Okay, you have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Thank you, Virginia. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Robert. So moved and seconded. Any comments, questions, anything from the board? Okay, I'll ask the public if there's any comment on any of the consent calendar items.
And again, if anyone has any public comment, you can use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And seeing none, Director Bernstein, you may proceed.
Okay, and if you would proceed with a roll call vote, I'd appreciate it.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin is absent. Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. The motion carries 4-0 with one director absent. Thank you. We'll move then to the regular agenda and item number 5, which is to adopt by resolution the district's fund balance policy. Chief, are you addressing this?
Yes, well, I will tee it up and then turn it over to Lon, but before we move on with that, I just very quickly on item number 4, I wanted to share with you that Governor Newsom has passed some new legislation that will take effect at the end of the year related to remote meetings. Our counsel, Steve Miller, will provide some information and guidance at our next meeting. So just stay tuned for that coming information that will have some impacts on us. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Lon. We brought this fund balance policy back to Finance Committee, and it was moved forward with a recommendation of adoption. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Lon. Thank you.
Good evening, directors. So item number 5 is our fund balance policy, the district's fund balance policy that we presented to the full board in the August 16 board meetings. This policy has been updated and prepared in accordance to the Government Accounting Standard Board issue GASB statement number 54. And this staff report is pretty much to request the board, the full board, to approve the policy by adopting a resolutions during this board meetings. And this we didn't change anything from the last version that was presented last month, and this is pretty much just a clean version, and we hope that the board members would approve and adopt a resolution to approve this policy. If there are any questions on the policy, I can address and answer.
Any questions from board members?
Just a clarifying question, if I may.
Go ahead, Robert.
Long on page 21, which is the you just mentioned. You mentioned, I think, down at the bottom of discussion, and it talked about the fund balance, but there was a comment that was made regarding defining what a on page 2.0, which is page 23, there was the question of a definition of adequate fund balance. Is there a particular, which is at the on page 23, 2.0 scope, the last sentence, it says this policy will ensure that the district maintain adequate fund balances and reserve in order to, and then it goes on. Is there a definition of adequate that is somewhere written that that we can kind of use as a yardstick?
That's a good question, directors. So at the moment, there is no really benchmark that we need to that we have right now for the districts or operating as a policy in the district. So to answer your question, we do not have a benchmark for just setting up the policy of that.
It appears to me that at some point, whether there is a signal need to be, not necessarily an alarm, but a caution flag need to be raised once there is that level of adequacy get breached in somehow, get breached, and I guess you don't know until it really it hits you upside the head and start hurting. But I think somewhere, and if whether that's practical or not in this situation, but somewhere along the line, I think in any of these definitions of that we're changing over to from that there needs to be some signal of some or some level of caution if you begin to fall in certain categories. I know the district haven't always been strong financially, and we want to continue to be there. But at some point, to me, we need to try to figure out how to define this adequacy in terms of within the fund.
Director Jones, if I can offer something up, my experience has been best practice with local government is that most local governments shoot for a target of 15% of their operating budget as a kind of a high bar for reserve balances. For us, that would be about $10 million. So that would be a level that I would just say, even though it's not documented, that I would start having some conversations for. We are obviously well above that and fortunate, but 15% is generally a standard that most local governments are trying to achieve.
So Long, based upon that bit of good information, thank you, Chief, I think kind of helps me to kind of put adequate in perspective. In terms of where we are in relationship to that, do you have a ballpark figure? If I'm sure we may be more than that, but
we are. Just to answer your question, we are way more than the 15% that we have in our reserve right now. I think in our reserve right now, if you can see in the July Treasury reports, we have about 78 millions in our fund balance reserve as a whole district, including CIPs as well.
And it's just as another wild question, and that would be, how many months down the road would that take us? Because the reason I'm bringing this up, the chief last month brought up this, I guess either last month or month before, where the state was considering taking back certain funds. I forgot off the top what that was, and it kind of, it probably wouldn't impact us, but much, but it would have been, and our reserves would probably have been sufficient enough to cover whatever. So that really started me to think about, well, what is our minimal bar that we really want to try to achieve? If it's 6 months, 7 months, or whatever that amount is, because I think at some point that we might, if we reached a certain goal and we maintain that goal, how other funds that potentially would flow into that particular those fund balance or that category could be shifted to somewhere else, that might be necessary, like a capital improvement kind of thing. So
yeah. So right now, in terms of the month, how many months we can operate based on our current reserve. If you're just talking about the general fund alone right now, we have about 52 millions, and our operating budgets right in fiscal year 23 is about 74 millions. So just based off that, I would say is more than 6 months that we can be operating using our reserve if something were to happen in terms of our revenue stream.
So, yes, Chief, you had some.
No.
Oh, so with that said, and I don't want to buck the horse here, but in terms of and really probably may not be able to give a clear answer to this one as well, because we're really on trying to to get our facilities up and operating and running. We need cash for that, and how the flow of cash into that particular CPI category or line item is at a certain pace, and the key to it is that can that be accelerated somehow through, I want to say robbing Peter to pay Paul, but pretty much using the certain funds to accelerate creating the cash flow in order to make these other properties, bring these other properties, improving them and bringing them online much quicker as a way of doing that. And then once that's achieved, flowing that funds back into, the reserves account. If that makes any sense, I don't know. It's just a thought.
So in terms of generating cash streams for the district, our district's cash stream is pretty much fixed with property tax. Mm-hmm. So whatever we receive in property tax, that's been appropriated during the budget process already. Mm-hmm. So in terms of what you're trying to achieve, directors, there is an opportunities to do that based on, let's say, if we have any budget savings at the end of the year, meaning that we underspend on our budgets, then at the end of the fiscal year, we would use that budget savings to kind of allocate it to the different categories of the reserve that we see fit and earmark and benchmark for the future. So this opportunities, we're going to have a staff reports next month that would provide a fiscal summary of the fiscal year 22's activities, and we're expecting some budget savings for fiscal year 22's as well. And staff is gonna provide recommendations of where those budget savings will be allocated to the fund balance reserve, and the finance committee meetings will determine or discuss and review if it's reasonable. Then we'll bring it to the board and present it. Then the board can fully discuss where it should go. But it is in the works. It's going to come. The staff report is going to come in October. So next month we will have a fiscal year 22's fiscal summary reports to you.
Okay, thank you. I do like to where if we can in any way possible, and it makes sense to other board members, but makes sense to me that if we can really begin to define that adequate fund balance in kind of in some numerical format, it at least have, a benchmark that we need to, even though we well beyond that point, and we can increase if we want to, but at least there is a surety that, at worst case scenario, this is what we're shooting for. And that would equate to, I don't know how many months of operation that would really equate to for us. But I think if it's a 6 month, if it covers 6 months, then hey, it covers 6 months of operation, or whatever that amount. The percentage may be higher, just because we burn through cash a little bit quicker and have a larger budget than. But whatever it is, I think that some minimal number need to really be there somewhere, and I don't see it stated in the fund balance. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to hold this stuff, but I think it would be nice to have it in, just in case we all pass away tomorrow and nobody's around to know what our thoughts are.
So, Director, if I could add in our plans, and this is going to be nice having our finance manager to help assist us on this, is to have some conversations with the board that will help guide us on exactly what you're talking about, what we're comfortable with. We have a potential desire to do that Station 1 project, which will be relatively expensive. So we also have a desire to create a sinking or replacement fund that the new finance manager will work on. And so with that, we'll come back to the board and have some conversations with what that looks like and what we're comfortable spending our reserve balances down to and what a reasonable amount is. Like I said, with most agencies, if you have 15%, that's incredibly robust. It's not quite the same as we have normally, like with our households, of having that 6 months cash in the bank reserves in case we lose our jobs. Because our funding from property taxes is so consistent, we don't expect that ever to diminish. Granted, we had that ERAF risk that popped up, so, but still a 15% contingency or reserve balance would help us deal with that. But our plan is to come back with some kind of comprehensive looks at what our reserves are earmarked for and what the board would like to do with them in the future, with some recommendations from us. But look forward to those in the coming months too.
Thank you. From around in 6 months, I will welcome that information.
Got it.
Any other questions from other board members? I have, Rob, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Chuck. I was going to make a motion to adopt the resolution, but go ahead.
Well, let me just ask my question, then we'll go
Sure,
through it.
go ahead.
I just had one question for Long. Long, we've talked about adjusting the balance sheet at some point to align it with the fund balance policy. And I know we're waiting for a report on workers' comp claims and some things like that. When do you expect we'll actually see an adjusted balance sheet taking those items into effect?
Are you adjusted balance sheet? Do you mention, sorry, the adjusted balance sheet, just the fund balance reserve revaluations? If that's the case, then we are working on that, and it should be included in the fiscal year 22 summary reports. So
Okay.
we are gonna incorporate what we discuss in the fund balance policy and kind of reallocate the fund balance reserve to our current fund balance policy after it's adopted.
Okay, and so that will appear in the auditor's report, basically.
It will appear in next month's staff reports, yes.
Okay, and then we'll be in the CAFR and all of everything from then on for fiscal year.
Yes, so in October, the board will need to have an actions of adopting a resolution to allocate any budget savings to the fund balance reserve. And during that time, we're gonna review our current reserve policy and our current balances, and just to allocate it based on the current reserve funding policy that we have right currently.
Okay.
So
And-
yes,
And that will be on the Finance Committee agenda?
that is scheduled for the Finance Committee in October. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Any other comments or questions? Rob, go ahead and make your motion, please.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to adopt by resolution the district's fund balance policy.
You have a second?
Second.
Virginia seconding. Any comments on the motion by the board? Any comments from the public on this item?
If so, you can use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And seeing none, you may continue, Director Bernstein.
Okay, if you would do the roll call vote, I'd appreciate it.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin is absent, Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. The motion carries 4-0 with Director McLaughlin absent. Thank you. We'll move on then to item number 6, which is to discuss the Administrative Service Director class description and the salary recommendations for Finance Manager, Human Resources Manager, and Administrative Services Director. Chief, is this you, or will Francine?
This will be me opening and then Francine taking all of the hard part.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm just gonna kind of line it up for Francine and start by saying this started with 2 things, a comp study and then also some support from the board during budget hearings to fund and fill an Administrative Services Director position. What I really want to do is I want to turn it over to the most competent and capable person to address this and answer the questions. But I also want to say, just because Francine is going to be talking in part about the position she's currently filling in here. And so just to eliminate the awkwardness of it is just to call out and say, I just want to make sure the board and the public is aware that the salary ranges and everything in here that's been proposed is coming from me and not coming from Francine. Francine happens to be dealing with one of the positions that happens to be hers in this board letter. So with that, I'm going to tee it up. It's yours, Francine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Board of Directors, staff, and members of the public. I'm bringing this, as the chief mentioned, I'm bringing the staff report to you today to discuss the new Administrative Services Director class description and the salary recommendations for the 3 positions: Finance Manager, HR Manager, and Administrative Services Director. As the chief mentioned, this position was added to the budget in 2022-2023, but the salary and benefits were a placeholder and the salary range was not set, nor was the class description created. In addition to this new position, the district is also wrapping up the classification and compensation study. And through this study, the consultant advised and identified only 3 classifications that were greater than 10% below the market median for the comparator agencies. These positions were the Finance Manager, Human Resources Manager, and Risk Reduction Officer 3. And of these classifications, the first 2 are filled, with the one being pending hire for Finance Manager, and the Risk Reduction Officer 3 is currently vacant. And although we're not requesting to adjust the salary range for the Risk Reduction Officer at this time, it's the chief's intent to address any outstanding compensation recommendations with each respective bargaining group during the current and or upcoming negotiation meetings. And just as an aside, the Risk Reduction Officer 3 is under the ASME representation. So the chief is requesting to set the salary for the Admin Services Director, and it's listed in the table that's in the staff report. The salary setting for the Admin Services Director is an internal relationship, which is a 15% direct report differential above the Human Resources and Finance Manager. And then the proposed salaries for finance manager and human resources manager would bring those positions closer to the median. The proposed salary for the finance manager would bring that classification a negative 3% below the market median. And then the human resources manager approximately a negative 6.1% below the market median, using the salaries as of the December 21 salary survey. In addition to setting the salaries, establishing the minimum and maximum for these classification, the chief is also requesting to reduce the ranges. The typical range for the district salaries for unrepresented positions is 50%. And the chief is requesting to reduce those from 30% when measuring from the minimum salary to the maximum salary. And there's no fiscal impact for the administrative services director position. For filling that position mid-budget year, as there was a placeholder. There's also no fiscal impact for 2022, 2023 for the finance manager position. There is a slight fiscal impact for adjusting the salary range for the human resources manager classification at approximately $4,500 for fiscal year 22, 23. And I'm open for any questions if you have any.
Questions from the board? Excuse me. I have a question about your last statement that there's no fiscal impact. I don't see how that's possible. If we raise the compensation for somebody, that clearly has a fiscal impact, and it's going to happen in the fiscal year that we're in. I assume we're going to hire someone in the next 8 months or 9 months or whatever. So how can it have no fiscal impact?
Are you asking for the administrative services director position?
Well, you said it was true for the finance position also.
Yeah, the administrative services director position was already in the budget, so there's no change in the fiscal impact. That position was already budgeted for. So this wouldn't request any more money being paid out of the budget. For the finance manager position, the appointment of the finance manager is within the current range. So there would be no change in the fiscal year impact for that position. For the human resources manager, there would be a slight fiscal impact because personally for me, my anniversary date is within the fiscal year. And if I'm given a merit and I'm not currently at the top, there may be a slight impact for what was actually budgeted. So for fiscal impact, what I'm comparing it to is what the district budgeted for these positions. And if there was any delta with what was budgeted to what will be charged against the budget.
I see. So it's a matter of terminology. I would say that there perhaps is no budget impact, but there's certainly a fiscal impact if we pay more money.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. I have another, which one of these should we be discussing? Should we be discussing the job description or the compensation?
So I would like to discuss all of them. All of them are on the agenda for approval. So whichever you'd like to start with.
Well, let's start with the job description, if that's okay.
Of course.
I had a comment about, and I'm certainly an advocate for this position, and I think I may have even made the motion to get it in the budget for this fiscal year and so forth. The one thing that I'm concerned about, being an educator and so forth, is on page 4 of it, the experience and training. It's the last page of the description.
Yes.
It's really a kind of a two-headed comment here. One is under training, the last sentence says graduate coursework in a related field is preferred. I think graduate coursework should be required. This is an important position. I don't know if other board members are aware of this now, but the fire district has a larger budget than the city of Menlo Park, the city of East Palo Alto, and the city of Atherton, the town of Atherton. I mean, this is a large organization. I mean, we're looking at a $75 million revenue stream in the coming year. And I think a bachelor's degree just isn't sufficient for this. This should be require a master's degree in public administration or a master's degree in business administration or some kind of related field. So I would strongly urge that we revise this to do that. But the other thing that I'm really concerned about is up above it here, where it says 8 years of progressively responsible experience in human resources, public administration, or finance. This position would actually, the finance manager would actually report to this position. I just don't think it's possible to have a strong, competent finance manager report to somebody who does not have a background in finance. I think it might last for a while, but it would be demotivated and potentially, I just think it'd be potentially conflictual to have a finance specialist reporting to someone who doesn't know or have a degree in finance. I would prefer to see the finance manager be an independent report to the chief, and in a sense, kind of a devil's advocate, or I don't know what to call it, a check and balance on the operations side. And then and I don't mean the fire operations, I mean the other business operations side and the finance side. So structurally, I would like to see something different here than how it's worded now. Anyway, those are my comments. I don't know who had their hand up first, Virginia, you or Robert?
Virginia did.
Virginia?
I did, but you kind of touched on it, Chuck, in terms of the structure. So what would this org chart look like then? I guess it would be this administrative services director would be reporting to you. Is that correct? Or
Right. So in theory, either to me or to a deputy chief. So typically in an organization like this, you'd have, let's just assume we have a deputy chief that runs day-to-day operations. Org chart would have this person reporting directly to the deputy chief, along with all of our division chiefs. So, and then underneath this person, you would have those other functions: IT, HR, finance. Trying to remember what else was on there. Clerk of the board, I think. So that's that being said, that's what the line chart would look like. They would all be part of the executive team, and like Director Bernstein is saying, and my experience with this administrative services director position is it's the civilian voice in the room that is oftentimes keeps us in check, cause in my experience, it's been one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable person in the organization for continuity of operations, keeping us in line with all the transparency requirements that are necessitated, by the public, by the board, et cetera. So I know that was a lot of, that answered more than you were asking, but that's really
that's helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's that part, and then the other part. I mean, I understand the advanced degree, Chuck, but I don't know. I mean, I think in some sense the experience could matter too, just as much, right? I mean, I mean, and this is something, I mean, it doesn't have to, for me, it's not, it would be preferable, right? But not necessarily required, but I'm the one with the MPA, right? So I get that, but not everyone's going to have that. And I mean, I would probably hire someone with more relevant experience than someone like me who doesn't have the relevant experience, even though I have the Master's of Public Administration. So I just think it just has to be a balance, right? That's my thought on that.
And can I add to that, Director Crowley?
Sure.
Yeah, so just as you stated, and just also as in response to Director Bernstein, is that we definitely can add that a master's degree is preferred. One concern with sometimes putting that on a job description is it creates barriers to entry, and historically will kind of eliminate diversity in your applicant pool if you're requiring a higher level degree that may or may not be required or justified as needed to perform the duties of the position. And that's why we list on all of our job descriptions, the qualifying language above, which says any combination of experience and training that provides the required knowledge, skills, and abilities. So we do have that kind of leeway to have, allow applicants entry that meet the knowledge, skills, and abilities through maybe a different route other than a master's degree.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
But I think at the end of the day, we're hiring the best that we can get. And I think that's what our residents expect from us.
Yes.
If I can add one thing also, it's going to be two things, is right now it's interesting, the hiring environment is very challenging. And as we are talking, just when we are trying to hire a finance manager and sharing our experiences with other jurisdictions, the talent pool is pretty shallow right now. And so I'd rather cast a wider net and make sure somebody's got, and I agree with you, to either have a specific finance background or have pretty broad knowledge in finance, and those things is important. And but yeah, like I said, if I would worry that if we made it a requirement, we might have very few candidates, or in my experience with some of our candidates in the last round that had an advanced degree, they were not the best candidate. That's my comments. Please go on. I know Director Jones had a question.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yes. Regarding the job description, and maybe I missed it somewhere in the presentation, Francine. Sometimes I don't hear too well when it gets late at night. But there's language in this job description that gave me the impression that there, and I'm only asking because I don't know, it seems like it's competing with the fire chief. If the org chart that I saw, I think someone sent out, showed the fire chief, and then below the fire chief, it had the deputy director, but between the deputy director and the fire chief, this line going over to the administrative service director. And the language, some of the languages, and I looked at, for example, there were so many, I'm just my eyes is going to one. It talked about either on page 32, number 8, it said prepare and present staff reports, make recommendation to the board of directors and the fire chief on matters in assigned area. And then, and it's just, I guess I'm really trying to understand where's the defining line between that person responsibility. I know it's clear on the org chart, but it seemed like the one I just read seemed like there's, when that person is going to take responsibility to prepare staff reports and make recommendation to the board. And then on number 11, it talked about motivate, train, and evaluate assigned personnel, provide or coordinate staff training, work with employees on performance issues, respond to staff questions and concerns, and then make discipline recommendation to the fire chief. Now, my assumption is that it's within, that it doesn't say to the areas of responsibility where there's HR, whether it's admin staff, finance staff. It didn't really say that. It said I took it as all of any staff. I could have read that wrong, and that happens sometimes too. So it's things like that in the job description kind of really makes me wonder, where does this person, the line of authority really ends, and its fire chief either not begin, but where it seemed like it moves in the area of things of expectation that, and that's maybe because that's what's occurring now within its expectation within the chief role, or moving into the fire chief role. So And there were some others. I'll just stop there. And so, I guess, Chief, in terms of trying to understand, if you got a clear understanding where that line of authority ends and where yours began, and where yours overlap that person, not the other way around, then I think, help me out here so I can understand.
Yeah, so I'll try to answer your question, Director Jones. So this position is, at the administrative, level, and but at the very, kind of center of it works at the direction of the chief. So a lot of these, typical duties are very similar for this type of position, because this position, typically with admin services directors, they're either, even though they oversee all admin services, they're either usually strong HR labor or finance. Those are kind of the two pillars of an admin services director. And for this position, being kind of over HR, a lot of these duties, that would be, they would be directing, obviously with the chief's, approval, but, doing training, employee staff development, that could go with, all employees district-wide, not just the assigned area. This position will respond to staff questions or concerns. That's kind of, what I do in my role as HR is responding to staff questions or concerns, and, going through all disciplinary kind of investigations and procedures. So this position would be kind of over that, but would be working directly, with the chief. But the chief is, the appointing authority, and he's the person that would make, discipline, basically decide on discipline, or so this position is working at the direction of the chief, but kind of as a business partner, overseeing each of these different units.
Let me make this, and I'm going to focus back on number 8.
Okay.
Second number 8, and I'm going to read it through and give you my where this kind of
Sure.
the language. It says prepares and presents staff report, make recommendations, and this is where I want to parentheses, to the board of directors and the fire chief. To me, that should read, make recommendation to the fire chief, because if that person reports to the fire chief, and any information that goes from operations to the board should come through the fire chief. Now, the fire chief will, say, hey, okay, well, just like we did, hey, Francine, you take over this part of it. But the way it reads to me is more of make recommendations to the board of directors. And I think, it's so like make recommendation to HR and the board of directors. I think it needs to go, it's about information flow. It needs to go to the chief. Chief needs to have time to look at all this stuff and analyze based on being a fire chief over everything, and find it and whether it is ready to go before the board. Rather than in this way, it would go to the board of directors and the fire chief. So I mean, language like that, it may be sounding semantic, but it really is not. It's about a point of clarification. Because
Director, would that make you comfortable if we inserted right after makes recommendations to the board of directors with concurrence of the fire chief?
No.
No, it's almost
No, it's because you're not in the chain of command, is what Robert's saying, right?
right.
Jenny,
Exactly.
hang on a second, please.
No, I
Sorry.
think it's apropos for that. You need to be, excuse me, Chief. The chief need to be the direct person that I'm not saying they have exclusive rights to the board, but it needs to be in that chain of command structure. And where it's right now, it's not. They're operating in equal with the chief. Because it goes to the way it's written, make recommendation to the board of directors and the fire chief.
Director Jones, I completely understand what you're saying. I don't believe that was the
I know it wasn't.
intent. I think was kind of in combination with, just like I'm doing today, I prepared a staff report. In my staff report, there's a recommendation that I'm bringing to the board that
Exactly.
I've totally vetted, you know, this is the chief's recommendation, but I can change that wording so that it's very clear that the recommendation goes to the fire chief and the fire chief brings the recommendation to the board.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying, because if not, I can see a person, you know, getting kind of, as they used to say in the neighborhood, getting big-headed at that point
Yeah.
and thinking that they, they're gonna run the things around it a little bit. But anyway. Yeah.
I will clarify that.
Rob, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chuck. Chief, you and Francine, or probably other members of your staff, have gone over these job descriptions, positions of delegation of authority, chain of command, relative to the way you want this within the organization, correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay, so this is your recommendation. And, you know, I have to say, we're getting a little bit into the weeds here operationally as a board. And I would feel a lot better that we let the chief and his senior staff deal with who this individual reports to, specifics relative to how the chief and his staff feel about reporting representations to the board, just like Francine said. And Robert had brought up, and with Virginia's concurrence, that it's got to be a little bit more defined. But I think we're getting into the operational weeds here. And I would rather kind of keep hands off unless it becomes a situation where the board needs to get involved. But I think through chain of command, operational decisions, I think this falls, other than how much we as a board want to pay these individuals. I think that's where our, I don't know, where our authority comes through the recommendations of salary through the chief and his staff. So that's where I'm at, Chuck, with a lot of this. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, your hand's up again. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Virginia.
mine is.
I just want to.
And then I'll go Virginia first and then Robert.
Sure.
I actually agree with Robert. I don't want there to be any ambiguity, and I don't think it's operations. This is something that is this impacts the board and how the chief reports to the board or not. So this is, to me, is not operations. This is, the decision-making structure of, who gets to talk to the board and who doesn't. And I agree with Robert that the language should not be ambiguous. I mean, I don't want this to be a slippery slope where we're trying to change the structure of the entire fire district, which has been, brought up before in the past, over the past few years. And I just don't think there's room for ambiguity here in the language. And I think it is our job to make sure that some of the language is not ambiguous, so that the chief knows exactly what the board's expectations are.
Robert?
It's my intent, and I'm not going to apologize for what I said, because I have seen situations where words do matter, and intent from the words are acted upon. And if it's not clear or not clear, then unexpected consequence may happen. And then it's a scramble to try to undo certain things at that point in time. And so it's just something that has, and I've been down this road before, and words do matter, intent do matter. It may not be seen now, but based upon that one thing I'm just trying to point out to you, there is a consequence there if the clarity, and if you may verbalize it, but a person may, still may not get it. But when it's in writing and it's clear, then there's no doubt as to what it says and where the relationship is in that regards.
Director, might I offer that we just delete the four words, the board of directors, and just have it say, makes recommendations to the fire chief on matters in assigned areas.
I think that's clear.
Okay.
And from there, you as the authority, the person that the board had put in charge of that, you can then at that point delegate, like what we're doing now, Francine, make the report, but not go for, you as a secondary.
Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
agree. So then what would it read exactly?
Virginia, please take your turn here. Robert's not finished yet. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, Robert.
No, I like the way the chief worded that.
I know I
And
couldn't
that's
hear it.
fine.
I'm just asking to have it repeated, so I didn't hear you very well, Chief.
Yeah, and we will change we're starting with makes recommendations to the fire chief on matters in assigned areas. We're going to delete the board of directors.
Okay, thanks.
Robert, are you done now?
Yeah, and I think just to go back through the job description where that road intertwines like that, just reconsider it, what it says. I'm done now.
Virginia, go ahead, please.
No, I just couldn't hear the chief when he was reading back the thing. I wanted to hear it before we moved on. So thanks for reading that or rereading that, Chief.
Sure. Michelle, did you catch that for whatever the motion is?
I have it written down, yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to make a comment that is, I think, a little going against the wind here, but I actually agree with what Robert said about not having the chain of command be clear and so forth. I think that's right. At the same time, I'm concerned about a couple of things. We had at one point a administrative services director. This was before my time, but I was aware of it. And it certainly was during the time that Virginia and Rob were on the board. And this person was a dictator and created terrible ill will. Some people say that she was responsible for us not having a contract with the firefighters for so many years. And it was a horrible situation. So that's one. I believe in government that we have checks and balances. And if you look at the way a fire department is run in a municipal government, there's the fire department, but the finance department is separate. And the human resources department is separate. And the facilities department is separate. And the fleet management group is separate. And there are people above them who sort of go back and forth and take the advice from all of these things. I became concerned when I heard the chief say, well, first of all, I was arguing that the administrative services director should have the competence and experience and education to be able to understand finance and facilities and some of those things. But when I heard the position was going to report to the deputy chief, I then became even more concerned because now we're putting it in charge of a person who has spent an entire career fighting fires or responding to medical calls, but has no background in these other things. And to me, there's just no check and balance in any of this. And we're coming out of a situation, and I'm going to be harsh here, but that's the way I see it, where we have been lied to as a board by management. We've had management who frankly was incompetent and made serious errors. We've had people in management who are afraid to speak the truth and tell the board what was going on. And while Rob could be correct in a way and saying, well, we're getting into the weeds, but the operations, if you don't know what's going on, and how can you talk about policy? If you don't know who's taking money, if you don't know who's making mistakes, if you don't know who's violating the laws, if you don't know that stuff, how do you deal with policy? And I wish we had started with a management structure rather than talking about one position, because I would like to see a fire district where there's a check and balance, where the board has an insight into what the real finances are instead of somebody telling us something that simply isn't true. We find out years later or months later. And I would like us to have an auditor that reports directly to the board. I would like the board to have some source of information that is credible. And right now we give the board just this giant sledgehammer. There's only one tool the board has to get what it wants, and that is fire the chief. That's all it can do, because we want to have the chief be the head of the operating line. And yes, there's no source of information that's independent, or where there's, in many organizations, when someone is called like a chief financial officer, that means that they have an independent duty to the board. They certainly report to the CEO. The chief operating officer would report to the CEO. But the chief operating officer is also bound kind of by an honor system and a commitment to the board to report wrongdoing, to report misinformation, and so forth. And there's an independent source. And I just feel like we're in the position of creating a czar here that is going to exacerbate all the worst things about a hierarchical organization: bad information, mistakes, hiding things. We've been there, and I don't feel like I want to be part of that again. So I would like to see the chief be getting this information directly, not through a deputy. The deputy can deal with with fire suppression and so forth. But this is why I think it would be good if we could somehow start with an organization structure rather than start with one position here.
So Director, let me see if I can allay your concerns. So just understand, I mean, strictly speaking, the chain of command, when it gets up to these administrative levels, the deputy chief is not the filter between this administrative services director and myself or any of the other executive staff. Generally, the deputy chief runs the day-to-day operations. The fire chief sets the objectives, deals with a variety of things. So that was never an issue in my last organization, where that administrative services director was in my office every day, along with the HR director and a variety of people. That usually that's the deputy chief is the one that does their performance reviews with input from me. But it's not this very rigid structure like we have in the engine companies, because we're in an administrative environment where things are not, you don't need that rigidity, and we won't have that. And then separately, you have my personal promise that we will, if we do by accident employ somebody like you've had experience with in the past, we won't employ them for long. I don't have any tolerance or patience for somebody who's not part of the team and does what's in the best interest of the district. And this is an at-will position, and hopefully that need will never arise, but should it, I have no hesitation to try and correct behavior and get them in line. And if not, exercise those at-will provisions. So just rest assured that we will not repeat that. And if it does get repeated, it will be very short term.
Chief, I just want you to know, though, that this in no way was directed at you personally. This had nothing.
No.
Comments have nothing to do with you. In fact, I saw you as a breath of fresh air that could come clean out all this, the bad stuff that we've had. But the fact is, you won't be here forever, and we put things in place that become precedents for the future, and who knows what the next person might do. So again, please don't think that this reflects on you at all.
I did not take it personally at all. So I just sharing with the way I work and the way our structure would work. So.
Okay. I didn't see what, Rob, was your hand up before Virginia?
No, mine was up first.
Okay, Virginia, go ahead, please.
So I understand where you're coming from, Chuck, but I'm going to be very brutally honest here too. The board hasn't always been above board, so to speak. So I think that we all play a role in checks and balances. And so I think that anytime I've been through this, I've been on this board for more than 10 years, and ambiguous language has been almost like a celebrated practice for some of the past board members, just so that they could say, oh, well, no, we didn't mean that, or we didn't do this. And they can manipulate board thinking, board votes, board outcomes, and even the board relationships with the management. So what I do want moving forward, if you really want to be honest about everything, then let's be upfront and honest, and let's put everything out in the open, make sure the language is very clear. So Chief, I'm very glad that you have suggested this language. So if that, I just want to put it out there that the management hasn't always been the problem. The board actually has to give direction to the management. And if there's manipulation at the board level, who is going to be the oversight of that? Thank God we have the press and we have the public. So I just want to make sure that, Chief, that, this is not, again, I want clarity, just so that we make sure that we have board, make sure that the board doesn't have shenanigans, which I've seen in my experience.
Okay, Rob? Rob, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chuck. When we're talking about past experiences, I just hate to look in the rearview mirror, but we have a new chief, and he's done so far, as I'm concerned, an excellent job. I have my utmost trust and confidence in his ability to be our fire chief. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't made any false representations. He hasn't taken us for a ride. He hasn't provided us with any information that's going to ruin the reputation of the organization. So, I have the confidence in him, and I would like him to run the organization the way he wants to. And for the clarification of the statement, Robert, good job. Get it right out there, throw the cat on the table, and get the proper wording that you want, and the chief fixed it. So, I just don't want to start with history, which I was lied to many times, but we have a new chapter in our organization. We have a new chief, and I'm ready to go forward with the organization the way it is now. And I just want to give everyone a good chance. And I want to give the chief a chance to run the organization the way he wants to with his senior staff. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
Chuck, one last thing for me, and I'm turning loose. I read once, and I don't know who quote for it, some of these scholars may know. It says that if you don't look at your past, you're doomed to repeat the situation. And so my attempt is to not to dwell in the past, but learn from the past so you can plot the future in a more insane or sane way rather than an insane way.
Are you done, Robert?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm done on this subject matter.
Oh, okay. Other comments by the board members? Okay, so we're focusing right now on the job description here. Let me stay on that same topic for a moment and go to the public, ask if there's any public comment on this job description for Administrative Services Director. Michelle, would you?
Yes, if anyone has public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And seeing none, Director Bernstein, you may continue.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion about this, or shall we just continue, or what's your pleasure here?
Yeah, I would like to get the update before I vote on anything on a job description myself.
Robert, could you be more specific about what update means to you?
Well, we don't spend 20 minutes on a conversation about changes that need to be made. And there may be some other subsequent conflicting areas that may need to be looked at. And so I'm just asking that if that one area and possible other areas are looked at and a clean version come back to us.
Let me ask you, Francine, did this go to a committee before it came to the board?
No, oh, yes, this did. This went to the HR committee.
I see. And Rob, you're on that committee, right?
So am I.
Right. Yeah, Robert and I are, and basically we went over the administrative manager's position or director. We didn't really get into the weeds with the other, I believe the other two. We can take it back to committee and Robert and I can wordsmith it and work on it appropriately if you like, Chuck.
Well, let me ask Robert. Robert, is that something you would like?
I think the chief understands what was what I was talking about, and I think everybody else understood. And I think what I'm saying is that I think if the staff can go back through it and look at it based upon our conversation tonight, I think staff is capable of putting together the language that needs to be changed and any other language that may be changed to reflect what this conversation is all about.
But bring it back to the HR committee in October, you're saying?
I mean, I think the chief did it. I don't necessarily bring it back to HR. He can if you want to, but I think, I mean, bypass us, as far as I'm concerned, and just bring it back to the board with the correct language. But if there's comfort in getting a second opinion on it, and the HR committee is that second comfort level before it comes to the next board meeting, I'm okay with that too.
Okay, Virginia, go ahead.
So Robert, really quickly, is it just this one edit that that the chief suggested and that he's read and Michelle has taken down? Because if that's the main change, which I agree should be the main change, then I'm actually okay with moving this forward.
It's more than, I think once you look at it, really, everybody, include all the board members, go back and look at it with those different set of lenses, then you'll see what I'm talking about.
Well, let's have.
Well, I see what you're talking about, but we have 4 of us here tonight.
I'm just saying that without belating this point, is that if you want to vote on it, I'm not voting on it. Okay, I'm just saying that up front right now.
No, that's
Because
fine. I just wanted clarification from you on what that's fine.
Okay, so
Chuck,
Robert seems to want to, continue it. I think that
Well, no, just take it back to committee, right?
that's what I mean. I think that certainly couldn't hurt it. Rob seemed to be all right with that as well. Rob, did you have another comment?
I was just saying, we can take each one of those job descriptions back to committee if you like, or we could just bring it, as Robert said, to the entire board again. I mean, we could do it that way too.
I think it would help to take it offline for at least part, because we could resolve questions. And if there's some minor wording changes, we can eliminate it without having to have the whole board be part of that.
Yeah.
Well, and also if we wanted to take a look at further changes, we can always, I mean, we're not in any hurry to do this, are we, chief?
Yeah, I mean, I'm anxious to fill it. I tried to bring it to the board last month and the request was made, please have the HR committee review it first. So this is, I mean, it's a necessary position I would really love to get filled. My question would be, and I don't know if it's to Francine or Steve Miller, give you guys a chance to listen. Does a job description necessarily need to be approved by the board of directors or just the salary range? I mean, is it possible for us to approve something to get it moving on the recruitment process and for us to go back and make edits to the job description and float them past HR without having the board approve changes to a job description.
Chuck, if I may,
Well, let me get the question answered first with Stephen, then you.
okay, yeah, because I mean, I wanted to add on to what the chief said.
Stephen, can you answer the question?
Sure. I mean, I'd be happy to let Francine weigh in on what she needs in order to be able to post the position. But I think the legal answer to the question is that it's not really a legal question. The
Right.
board can decide what it wants to take authority over. Absent action by the board, I think, Chief, you have the authority to issue this job posting, and until there's a salary to fill, you don't really need board action, but the board could decide differently, and they certainly have that authority to say what their authority is.
Right. So that was my question. So generally speaking, Chief, I think you're right in terms of the job description, but I think since there are potential issues that could have unintended consequences, maybe it is something that the board should just, continue to keep an eye on. I mean, that's my opinion, but for sure the salary range, should be at least looked at. I mean, it's in here.
And my intention isn't to shortcut or bypass over the concerns.
No, I know. I get that.
I'm just trying to get the position, which is an important position, filled. And yeah, it's probably 4 or 5 months out from whenever we decide we can move forward. So that's I just like to have that person in that position by the time we get to budget next year.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, if I'm talking about if we were to make a decision, I just want to make sure the language is right. And if the language, and I don't want to rush it. I mean, if it can, next month is into October and then we go into November. Is that going to be too long? If we need, I'm not saying it's going to take that long. I'm just saying if we need the extra time, what is our cushion?
Well, it seems like the will of the board is to take this back to committee. The
will of the board is to get the language right, I think, and take it back to the committee.
Yes, well.
That's the will of the board, is to get the language right, whether it's at the committee level or at the board level.
Okay, well, first it would go to the committee, and then second it would go to the board.
I'm aware of that.
Okay. Okay, so can we move on to the next part of this item then, please?
I think Robert had a comment.
No, I defer that. Defer my comment.
Okay,
So what is it gonna do? We're gonna take it back to the committee then, right?
yes.
Okay, perfect. Just to be clear on the direction.
Just for clarification, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
For taking it back to the committee, and for the HR committee, would you like me to go through and redline what changes I believe you're intending you made, Director Jones? Because I believe I understand what you're saying, and I can kind of start that.
That's the peace sign, yes,
Okay, thank
for
you.
me.
Yeah, Chuck?
Yes, Rob.
Yeah, as Robert said, that'd be helpful. If you could redline the items that were brought up by the board tonight, that'd be great, Francine.
Sure.
And then we'll go through each one of the job descriptions and then come back to the board with it. Thank you.
And just for clarification, Director Solano, it's just one class description. It's just this one that's coming to the board. The other two are just adjusting the salary range.
Okay.
Robert, what do you think?
I think Francine got it. She.
Okay.
The intent, yeah.
So you're good with it, Robert?
Yeah, I'm.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Since you're the other half of the committee, I want to make sure that you and I are together with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question for, and it might not be so quick, for council, Steve. Is it possible for the board to potentially approve the salary ranges tonight and then also give authority to the committee to approve the job description whenever the committee meets without it having to be revisited by the board?
Sure.
Oh.
They could then ratify a decision made by the committee for sure, or the board can authorize you to issue the job posting. It sounds like your interest, Chief, is in getting a job advertised. Is that
Yes.
right?
That's what I'm trying
You
to do.
could,
But
the board could give you that authority if it wanted to.
so looking for comfort level with the board, and that's fine. So be it. If it costs us another month, it does. But I'm trying to shrink that delay by 2 weeks. But it's a pleasure of the board.
I have my hand up, Chuck.
Go ahead, Virginia.
I would like it to come back to the board one more time. At least. That would be what I would want, just to make sure I'm understanding the language and that there's no ambiguity.
Okay. Rob?
Yeah, Chuck, pose to the chief and Francine, what are the salary levels that you're anticipating for this position, Chief?
I'll let Francine address that.
Oh, okay, either or.
Hi,
So-
Director Solano. So the salary for this position, the proposed minimum in a monthly rate is $16,133.61, and then
130,
yeah,
60,
so $16,133.61.
okay,
And there would be a 30% range from the min to the max, and so the max would be $20,973.70. So those are the minimum maximum ranges in monthly, and that is 15% above the recommended new range for finance manager and HR manager, just to have that direct report differential.
okay. Chuck,
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know how I make a motion to this for this salary range. Maybe Stephen and can help me a little bit with it.
Rob, could I just ask you to hold this because we're about to discuss the whole issue. I will call on you first when it comes to time to making a motion. If
Oh,
you-
sure, okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
But that's the second part of the staff report and what's part of this agenda is to
Okay.
talk about all three salary ranges and what Francine is talking about in terms of the range is premised on the range of the other positions also. So it seems to me we ought to deal with it as a whole right now and start there. Francine, do you want to kind of reiterate the notion about these positions and where you are on it and what you're trying to do here?
Okay, sure. I'll just go back and kind of go over that because I know we've had lots of discussion. So as a result of the classification and compensation study, there were 3 positions identified as being very far away from the median, and very far is greater than 10% below. And the positions were the finance manager, the HR manager, and then the risk reduction officer 3. The risk reduction officer 3 is vacant, and that's an AFSCME position, and we'll be starting AFSCME negotiations on Monday, actually. And so the chief would like to hold on making any recommendations for any other representative position to address that at the negotiations table. But for the 2 other remaining unrepresented positions that are below the 10%, the chief would like to adjust those. One is bringing the finance manager to a -3% below the market median, and the HR manager a -6.1% below the market median. And the reason for that differentiation is that it is the chief's desire to have those 2 salaries aligned for finance manager and HR manager. And as a result of the class study, the HR manager actually came in lower than the finance manager. I believe the finance manager was approximately 12, maybe 12.5. And I believe the HR manager was like 15. I'm trying to get my spreadsheet up, sorry. So finance manager was 12.5% below median and HR manager was 15.9% below median. So keeping those two salary ranges aligned will make the kind of the relationship to the median, it won't be equal basically. And that's the difference there. And then as part of that salary adjustment, the chief would also like to reduce that range. As stated before, our ranges are very large with 50% from bottom to top. And we want to reduce it to a 30% range for the finance manager and the HR manager. And then for the admin services manager, based on an internal relationship, set that salary at 15% above the HR manager and finance manager proposed salaries.
Sounds good to me.
I'm sorry, was that you, Robert? Did you want to?
Yeah, I was just saying that sounds good to me. I'm looking at the chart that Francine put together, so it's in line with what we've been talking about earlier. So I think this is a good kickoff point to set it straight.
And we did bring these salaries also to the HR committee.
Any other comments? I'll make a comment here then. I think the concept is reasonable as Francine is presenting it, but I would sure like to see us do this as a whole. I mean, we got the comp study. We have some positions that are 30% over the median, and there doesn't seem to be any rush to fix that. And yet here we are with where we're going to be satisfied with these two positions being 3% and 6% under the median. And to me, I think we ought to fix the problem and have a holistic proposal, look at the balance and so forth. So that's one point. The second point, and it's unfortunate that that's what it is, that it happens to be kind of senior management positions. But here we are kind of taking care of senior management and proposing increases, but not dealing with the rank and file and those kinds of things where there were a number of other positions that are, you know, kind of right at the median and so forth. So it's too bad that we have, again, finance and HR getting the increases here when we ought to be looking at this as a whole and looking at the whole study. And I don't know how much time that will take. I know Francine mentioned that this is something that she's proposing to bring up as part of union negotiations and so forth. But I still think that the district can have a position of where it would like to get to. What's its goal? And we still don't have a position and I think the board has not been assertive in terms of having this. Do we want to be at the median? Do we want to be at 10% over the median? Do we want to be at 30% over the median? What is the goal of the board? And once we ought to just decide what our policy is. Do we want to be the highest paid fire agency in the state? If that's what we want, we should announce that. But to have some people in that position and other people still below the median just feels like it's hodgepodge to me. And I would like to get this settled kind of once and for all. Robert, please go ahead.
Chuck, my comment is that there's a immediate situation that we're facing right now, and that in terms of just trying to prioritize things, the chief is looking to hire and correct people that are already in certain positions right now that's integral to this new position that the chief wanted to bring on board, which is the administrative service manager. And what's impacting that is two positions right now. Is the HR person and the finance person. So that needs to be fixed right now. As soon as we had got the job description right, we could have been fixing all of it at once. But we can at least fix and get some affirmation on those three positions right now, fitting the scope and within the parameters that the consultant came back and we just spent almost 2 hours in closed session talking about. So it's just a matter of just getting affirmation on the salary range and having that not to be an impediment for these other positions, waiting on that when the immediate positions that need to be filled. And the chief just explained to you why we feel like that there's some little urgency for this new administrative service manager. And so all three of them come at as a quadruplet that you need to do, go through and deal with right away. So I'm okay dealing with the salary range. Only
they
one
don't-
job description we're talking about.
Robert, they don't have to be done at the same time. In other words, we could say, okay, that's where we're headed with the finance manager and the HR manager. Right now, we're going to do the administrative services and we'll just peg it at such and such a price. I mean, it's just this very bizarre situation where we've just hired a finance manager under the old system, and we're about to vote on an increase. The guy's going to get a salary increase before he even joins us.
Director Bernstein, so it won't impact, there won't be any salary increase. This won't adjust the salaries of anyone unless they were up on their anniversary date. So the finance manager will start at the salary that we proposed to him in his offer letter. Then after a year, when he has his review, he would be eligible for an increase like he was before, but it won't change any salary.
I say, I don't want to get into specifics, but let me just ask kind of in theory. Are you saying that even if we narrowed the range from 50% to 30% and that brought the bottom up, because what we're trying to do is get the top up, so
Yes.
the bottom would come up, you're saying that even if the person was hired below the range, we wouldn't make a change at this point?
So if it was outside the range, there would be a change.
Okay, well, let's not go any further then. I don't want to be talking about confidential thing. I was just trying to understand what our policy was.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In any case, Rob, is that your hand there? Yeah, go ahead, Rob. You're on mute.
Thank you, Chuck. This is directed to the chief. Chief, what do you need from us tonight to get these positions advertised?
I mean, approving the salary ranges will be a good start. We'll have to see whether or not we can actually advertise without a job description. So my gut feeling is right now, no, we can't. So, but at least when we come back to the board, we'll only be dealing with one issue next month, and that will be the job description. And then briefly to Director Bernstein's comment about trying to address it all at once. I mean, it's that analogy of eating an elephant, it's one bite at a time. And we're just trying to take a couple small bites and work our way through it. So it's a much more efficient way for us to deal with this rather than the entire agency and multiple bargaining units at once. So it would be great, but it's not the most feasible or efficient way right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chief. Unfortunately not. It isn't the most effective way to do it, especially if you want to advertise a position, you want to be able to advertise it in its complete realm with special requirements, tasks, and everything else that falls into the category. So,
well, wait, I have my hand raised. Before you make a motion, Rob.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm just trying.
I agree with you.
I'm trying to help the chief here because I want him to get these positions advertised. So, he's looking at three major positions here for his senior staff, and probably the weakest part of the organization is admin services. I'm trying to call the cavalry for him. And unfortunately, if we do agree upon the salary ranges, we still have to get into the weeds where the key duties about the role, the purpose, and everything else that falls into the aspect of each one of these classifications. So, Francine?
I have my hand raised.
Excuse me?
No, when you're ready, I have my hand raised.
Yeah.
Robert, are you done?
I am finished. Thank you.
Virginia, go ahead, please.
So I actually agree with Rob on that. And normally I wouldn't necessarily be, in the weeds, as Rob would put it, with regard to this job description. But I do think that Robert brought up a good point, and I would like clarity. And I am reminded of the time we were literally changing the job description of the fire chief when we were doing a fire chief search. And I am reminded that, it was such a mess that it's, in terms of having all these things happening at the same time, I don't want us to have to go through that again. So I would almost rather present everything in its entirety, and maybe that's a month out, but at least it's done right. Instead, Mark, it was terrible when we're literally in the middle of a chief search and we're changing the chief's job description. And that's not what I want for this. I want us to be able to present a good package, like a packet of information to anyone who wants to apply for the job. And so that there's clarity to the applicant, and the expectations for the board are met, the expectations are met. So I understand that these are important positions and you want to fill them, and you have filled one of them already. I think it's so I don't know. I mean, that's just my two cents. I just don't want us to be in a position where we're, doing one thing and then we're changing the job description based on that. I mean, it was a mess, and we don't want to go. I don't want to go through that again. And I don't think the public should have to go through that again either.
Could I, not because I'm disagreeing with you, Virginia, but I wanted to ask Stephen a question. Stephen, there was some issue about, I guess, in the public sector, when you advertise a position, would it be possible for us to advertise the title of a position and even a compensation level and ask for resumes without having a job description, and just say that the job description will be released in a month or whatever?
Sure, it's not really a legal question. It's a question of what information is necessary to attract the right candidates. But you could certainly post a job description saying, this is the tentative job description that is subject to revision and will be updated in the next X weeks. So the answer to your question is generally yes.
Well, so there's nothing about, somehow violating discrimination rules because you're changing the qualifications once you've started receiving expressions of interest and so forth?
No, presumably you wouldn't be doing that for discriminatory purposes. So I'm not sure I understand the concern you're expressing, but what I'm hearing is not what you're suggesting. What I'm hearing is some delay in approving a final job description, and you're proposing a way that it would allow the chief to start the process and update the job description as necessary a little bit later.
Well,
I have no legal objection to
this came
that.
into it because one of the things that was being changed when we were doing the job description is whether the fire chief needed to have a bachelor's degree or not. And by changing the qualifications and requiring a bachelor's degree, we were actually discriminating against some applicants and so forth. I mean, that's why I was asking. Okay, well, in any case, it seems like, Chief, if you wanted to at least do some advertising and gathering expressions of interest, you could start doing that without a conflict with the finalizing the job description. So,
Chuck, I think that's why are we repeating ourselves? And Virginia just had to explain to you what we did with the chief. That was bad on us, rough on the board, and here we are doing the same thing over again. Why can't we just I thought we were through that issue with this job description, and here it is being drugged back through the mud again. And I don't understand why. I thought we set an action for that, but now it sounds like it's being dismantled in a very subtle way to get into something different. You know, that's part of, as I see it, it's been the problem of our board in terms of having the schizophrenic behaviors and not knowing exactly what we want to do, and then changing it on a regular basis, so it makes us appear as though we don't know what we're talking about, or we don't know how to handle it as a group. So I'm just saying, we already got an action on it. So let's just move on it, on that action. Those 2 job descriptions, I don't think anybody have any other job description, anybody have any complaints with that. You know, so we just approve that and move on. You know, why do we have to keep dragging this thing out for the next half hour? Let's just move on.
I'm not sure. I mean,
You know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's just move on. That would be my recommendation, but you know, you're the chair, so you do what you need to do.
well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we ought to have a final job description myself. I was trying to reconcile. The chief was very upset that we were losing a couple weeks and wanted to see if he could advance this and so forth. So I was just trying to find out what could be done to help him out. But let me make sure I'm clear about your thought. You think we ought to just bring it up as we talked about at the committee, and then we bring it up at the board meeting and go from there?
Didn't we just talk about that? Didn't we just agree on that as a board? You need affirmation on something that's already been affirmed.
Okay, well, that's fine then. So Rob, I promised that when it came time for a motion or whatever, that I would come back to you on this.
Well, well, thank you. You know, I do have reservations relative to put out a job description, to put out a job announcement without a job description. But we're mandated to do what we have to do. I want to help the chief here so he can. I don't know if I would put in for a position if I didn't know the purpose and about the role and key duties and everything. But gosh.
But it seems like we're at a point where we could either make a motion to to set the administrative services director compensation, or in fact to set all 3 of these as recommended. It seems like those, or to do nothing, but those seem like the 3 options.
Okay, well,
if I could just add, it sounds like there's enough concern from the board. So we'll, regardless of what the action is tonight, we will wait until it's approved by the board next month before we float that. It's not going to debilitate us to not fill it. So I'm obviously anxious to fill my senior staff level structure, but yeah, it doesn't need to be expedited in such a manner to cause these concerns. So that's fine. Whatever you approve tonight, just know once we won't float that till the job description is finalized. And
thanks Chief. Thanks for the lifeline.
Sure. I appreciate everyone trying to support me. I'm sorry that it caused us to get a little sideways in some respects, but yeah, I appreciate the support. Thank you.
Okay, Rob. So do you want to proceed then with a motion regarding the compensation proposal?
Well, I can do that. As I said, I feel, let me get the salary range levels here.
So on page 2 of 2, or page 31 of our packet,
That's
is
what I'm doing.
the chart that Francine was proposing.
Right.
What the chief really needs is the top position, but what supports it is the other 2 positions. So again, we could go with just one position for all 3.
Yeah, I'd like to do a discussion item on, are we looking at the proposed minimum and maximum? Is there an agreement, within the whole board to do the proposed minimum and maximums on all these 3 positions before I make the motion?
Well, we won't know until you make the motion. We vote. on it.
Okay, well then I'll make the motion. I'd like to make a motion that the 3 class titles, Administrative Services Director, the proposed minimum $16,133.61 to the proposed maximum of $20,973.70. Under finance manager, the minimum range $11,131.96. The proposed maximum range $18,238. Human resource manager, the range minimum $11,131.96. Proposed maximum $18,238.
I'm sorry, Director Solano. The range minimum that you read is the current range minimum. And then if you go to the right two columns, it says proposed minimum and proposed maximum.
Okay, then you want the, okay. Let's go back to finance manager.
You don't
That's
have,
14.
you don't have to read the numbers again, but she's.
I will go back, okay? How's
proposed.
that?
The recommendation number 3 would take care of that, Rob. Look at it and what the recommendation number 3 is.
Where are you reading, Robert?
On page 30 of our report. Recommendation number 3.
Okay, well, I was just going to read the numbers though too also.
Okay,
So, yeah, no, I was going to read the numbers. Thank you, Robert.
yeah, go for it.
Okay. Michelle, are you ready?
I think I have it, yes.
Okay. Make a motion to do the 3 class title classifications. The first one, Administrative Services Director. The proposed minimum, $16,133.61. The proposed maximum, $20,973.70. Finance Manager. The proposed minimum, $14,029 or decimal 0.23. Proposed maximum, $18,238. Human Resource Manager. Proposed minimum, $14,029.23. Proposed maximum, $18,238. Did I do it right,
Okay.
Francine?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Robert seconding. Any further discussion on the motion?
Thank you, Robert.
I'll go to the, for public comment on this item. Any comment from the public?
Anyone has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And Director Bernstein, I see none.
Okay, will you proceed with the roll call, please?
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin is absent. Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
I'll vote nay, and I'd like the minutes to reflect that I would like to see this done as a whole rather than selecting the top managers of the district. So the motion carries 3-1 with Director McLaughlin absent. And we'll move then, please, to item number 7, which is to discuss the district's employee performance review requirements. And again, Chief, do you want to start with this?
Sure. Just real briefly, this was a request from Director Bernstein during our agenda setting meeting, just trying to check and see what our compliance is with our annual performance reviews. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Francine.
Good evening, Board of Directors. So on this item, just to give you a little a preface before I start the background. So for performance measurement, step and merit increases, we follow the either the past practice or the language in each of the respective bargaining group MOUs. So typically for performance reviews, they're conducted, for non-probationary positions on an annual basis. And during that process, the manager will establish measurable goals, identify, any training areas for improvement, and any coaching maybe that their employees will need, any corrective performance. And then based on the review, if it's satisfactory or above, then the employee would be eligible for a step for merit increase. And those base pay increases are only authorized on an annual basis. So an employee wouldn't be eligible for a merit or step increase more than once per calendar year. For the groups that the district currently has, we have 5 groups, and starting with IFF, the process per their MOU is that probationary suppression employees, so suppression are the employees that are on the line, they receive monthly evaluations during their probationary period. Once they are attain permanent status, they have annual evaluations, and those evaluations are done in December for all of the IFF suppression employees. For probationary prevention employees still under IFF, but on the prevention side, those employees have quarterly evaluations during their probationary period. And for permanent prevention, they have annual evaluations on their anniversary date, which would be their date of hire or promotion if they were promoted into a different position. For the district's second bargaining group, AFSCME, again, for probationary employees for AFSCME, the evaluations are quarterly. And once you attain permanent status under that bargaining group, you have annual evaluations again on your anniversary date, which is your date of hire or date of promotion. For battalion chiefs, actually for the last 3 groups, the battalion chiefs, chief officers, and management confidential, the district's practice is to perform annual evaluations, which would be also on the anniversary date, which is the date of hire or date of promotion. For many of the AFSCME and IFF classifications, the district was basically maintaining the status of this requirement of having annual performance reviews. For the unrepresented positions, when I came was appointed at the district, I found that it wasn't as consistent. There were people actually that hadn't had any merit increases or performance evaluations for many years. So now what we're doing is we're tracking this information so that we can make sure that employees will receive annual evaluations, and if they're not currently at the top of the step and have satisfactory performance or above, that they would be eligible for a merit and or step increase. So we're tracking that and we're pushing the data out to the managers. It is a manual process because the district doesn't have a human resources information system where we would be able to track this. So we track it on, and I created an Excel spreadsheet to track this historical data and then run queries and then basically send this information out once a month to any employees that may be coming due for a performance evaluation. So I'd say right now with our employees, we're 99% compliance with having a current performance review and that the employee has had their base increase within the past 12 months if they're not currently at the top step. So I'm available for any questions if any board members have questions regarding this presentation.
Rob, did you have a question? No. Okay. I have one, Francine. I was curious in the uniform side of it.
Yes.
Are the captains evaluated by the battalion chiefs?
Yes.
Okay. And then the battalion chiefs are
Reviewed by the division chiefs.
division chiefs. And then does the deputy chief review the division chiefs, or does the
No.
chief review them all?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Does the chief review the deputy in the division, or does the deputy review the division chiefs?
So the chief can definitely input on any performance review. The deputy is the one that prepares the review, and then that goes to the fire chief.
I see.
So
Sure.
Yes, Director Jones?
Rob had his hand up
Oh,
first.
sorry. Yes, Director Solomon?
No, I'll go ahead. Go ahead, Robert.
No,
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 Rob,
no,
please go.
Rob, you had your hand up first. Go.
No, I'm just gonna, Francine,
Yes.
as to the performance review, it's whoever their immediate supervisor is. Does the second higher, like, is it a dual review? Like an example would be a fire captain is reviewed by a battalion chief. Now, does the division chief that handles that battalion chief, does he also sign off on that fire captain's evaluation, or is it only one tier supervisory approval?
Yes, so the division chief does receive, the division chief of our operations receives all of the suppression performance reviews. So those all go to our acting division chief in operations, and then they go into the personnel files.
Okay, so there's a 2-level supervisory review. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Rob.
Robert?
Francine, maybe you mentioned this, but for those that are on probationary,
Yes.
they have monthly evaluation. What is the term? Is everybody on the same 3 months, 6-month term in terms of probation?
So typically, yeah, because we do hire, in groups when we're doing our, our IFF, our entry firefighter. We usually kind of do a bulk or mass hire. And so all those employees would be on the same kind of rotation for their monthly evaluations during their probationary period because they have the same hire date. So they're on that same kind of cycle.
And how long is the probationary period?
The probationary period, that's a good question. And I know my former district or my former agency was 18 months, and here I'm not sure if it's 18 or 12, but I feel like 18, and I'll have to check that for confirmation.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Francine, could I ask you please about the task force personnel? Who evaluates them?
So the task force personnel that's non-district employees?
No, the ones who are district employees, who are assigned to the task force.
Okay, so that process I'm actually for the USAR, I'm not familiar with that process. I don't know if anyone on the meeting is. If not, I can find out and bring that information back to you, but I'm not familiar with that performance appraisal for task force.
I see. So, okay. And then do we have any kind of specialty evaluations? For example, a fire captain who is not a paramedic might not be able to evaluate a paramedic. I'm just saying that hypothetically or something. Do we have anyone who would say evaluate paramedics also or in parallel with the captains?
Not to my knowledge. I believe it would be that if it was an engineer or a firefighter and that person was a paramedic and the captain was not a paramedic and that was their supervisor, I believe that person would still be doing the assessment because the supervisors are doing the assessment. I don't believe anyone that it would shift to a different captain that was not the supervisor. I don't believe so.
Yeah,
So-
if I can add, for the paramedics, Melanie Stars, our EMS coordinator, works with all the paramedics on paramedic skills and feedback and tape reviews. So they end up getting feedback from 2 separate parties.
Chuck, Francine, the tools that you use for evaluation, are they standardized tools in the industry, or are any of them specialized for our particular district?
So, so I think that they're pretty similar. I think if you're looking across other fire departments, but we use our own performance appraisal. But I'm sure that there's probably some overlap with other fire departments or agencies in regards to the tool that they use. But we have our own form that we use for the line personnel, and then we have a separate one for the non-IFF employees.
Thanks.
And just to answer your question, Director Jones, the probationary period is 12 months.
12 months? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
I have one more question also, and it's just because I've read the whole packet and I know what the next agenda item is. But I was wondering how do we, from a form standpoint, how do we evaluate people's goals or the specific projects they're working on? Is that just done kind of just by almost an essay answer, or do we have specific forms that relate to goals?
Yeah, we don't have, the district does not have specific forms as it relates to goals. So that's more of a kind of a free form style on the on the performance appraisal, where the manager will work with the employee on, on number one, establishing goals for that, review period, and then reviewing how that employee performed in the completion of those goals at the end of the review period. And then they'll work together on establishing new goals. So it's more of a free form. There's a section for goals, but it's not a separate kind of rating section. It's more of a free form style.
Okay, and then the other thing I was going to ask is, can you tell me how succession planning fits into the evaluation? In other words, in terms of helping direct somebody's career or talking about where they might take some coursework or get some special experience or something, how does that factor into the evaluations?
So I'm not sure how it factors into the evaluation. I know that it kind of depends on the group, but I know for the line employees that they have we have a lot of acting positions available up through the ranks, and employees interested in different acting assignments will complete task books, and that's kind of where the employees will get exposure and development within each of those levels. I don't know how that or if it is incorporated into the performance review when someone is an actor. I would assume that it would be discussed, but I don't know if it would be based on any rating. I'm not sure I have the correct answer for that one, but
Is the task book process managed by the training person, or is it managed by the supervisor or the person who's doing the task book?
So I believe it's kind of a combination. It's the training officer who signs off, I think, on the task booklet, but the managers, the battalion chiefs or division chiefs will work usually with the person that's the actor to make sure that they're kind of moving along. If there's any assistance needed, there's lots of elements to the task booklet, not only on the suppression side, but on the administration side, with meeting with HR, and doing kind of understanding that role. So I believe it's a combination of both the training as well as the managers.
So along
Go ahead, Robert.
question. Along those lines, is there if there's a shining star that comes in and people recognize maybe a shining star, is there a fast track or a particular track that a person could be placed in that will expose them in a way that will eventually they may be able to go up through the ranks and possibly deputy chief, or maybe one day aspiring to be a chief? Is there such a mechanism put into place that we have that guide a person?
I think that's kind of the whole premise of the task booklet is kind of getting those employees that are interested, and wanting to learn and getting the exposure and moving up through the ranks is that. I think the whole kind of foundation of that of the task booklet is getting that employee, opening a task booklet, getting them, the exposure, so that they can kind of move into those different positions, as, getting the acting experience. So that's what I believe that kind of role is for with the task booklet.
Thank you.
It helps to fast track it. If someone's not interested, then they don't do it, but there's a lot of people that actually do
Thank you.
it. Uh-huh.
I'd like to ask also about the interaction with raises and so forth,
Yes.
excluding where there may have been a delay for a period of time in a raise.
Mhm.
Let's say in the last, you've been here, what, 3 years, Francine? Um,
No. Yeah, maybe feels like it, just a year and a half.
Oh, is that right? Okay, well, you've done a lot in a year and a half, so it's, but I'm just curious, are you aware of anyone who hasn't gotten a merit increase?
Not since, yeah, when I was here, when I started, yes, and everyone is up to date.
No, I was really wondering if anybody had been denied a merit increase.
Oh,
because-
denied.
Pardon me?
Did you say denied?
Yes, denied.
Okay.
Yeah,
Since I've been here?
yes,
No.
okay. Okay, any other questions from board members? Let's go to the public then. Any questions on this agenda item number 7?
Anyone has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. Director Bernstein, I see none.
Okay, there's no action on this, so we'll proceed to the next item here, which is our development and district water requirements. Oh, I'm sorry. No,
I think you passed
skipped
up.
over number 8, the criterion requirements for division chief and deputy chief future recruitment.
This is mine. This was a conversation that we had during our agenda setting meeting and a request to kind of share with the board what the plans were for the division chief and the deputy chief level positions. Those are both at-will positions that are within the fire district. So what I'm going to do is share with you what the current minimum qualifications are. I'm really going to just talk about experience and education and what the plans are for recruitment. So starting with division chief, that's the lower of the 2 levels. Right now, we actually have an open internal recruitment going for division chief. The current requirements, and I'm just going to read out of the job description, are 5 years increasingly responsible experience in fire operations and or training in a recognized fire department, including 2 years of supervisory training experience at the level of fire captain or above, served in operations or training. And there's also a requirement that the candidate has to have a bachelor's degree from an accredited college or university as a condition of employment. There is an exception there. If the candidate lacks enough college credits, they actually have the ability to obtain their degree in a reasonable time period with that's mutually agreed upon with the fire chief. Just so you know, when we put that opening out for, or when we opened that position up, the caveat was that if somebody was short on credits for their bachelor's degree, they had to have a specific timeline for achieving that so that we can take a look at that. So that is what's happening right now with division chief. That is open currently through next Tuesday. Again, only open to internal candidates. So that would include battalion chiefs and current fire captains. The next position is the deputy chief level position. We've not had that permanently filled since Chief Schaefer was in that position. The job requirements for that currently are 8 years of experience in fire operations, including 5 years of increasingly responsible supervisory experience equivalent to that of battalion or division chief. So you can't move from fire captain directly into that position. And a bachelor's degree is required. So without any exception currently. That is, the current plan is keep that job description as is. And my intention also is to open up an external recruitment. We'll use our internal HR staff, AKA Francine, to do a large recruitment like we did for fire chief and finance manager, et cetera. And we'll open it up broadly to anyone interested in the fire service. So the plan and hope would be to open that up relatively soon, and with the hope and desire to be able to fill that position by January of 2023. And that will have align with Chief Navarro's retirement also. So with that, I didn't complete a staff report because I figured it was just easier to read from these things and have a conversation with you and then open it up to any questions. With that, Director Bernstein, any questions?
I do have just one question, and that I applaud the fact that you've made the bachelor's degree required. As an educator, I'm a big believer in education, obviously, and I've actually been disappointed by people who've been with us for perhaps 20 years and who never finished their bachelor's degree. And it seemed like the being a firefighter was almost the perfect opportunity to finish a degree, because with 2 days on and 4 days off, it just seemed like there was lots of time where one could do that. And I don't know if we've encouraged it or haven't encouraged it, but I would love to see a program where some of these people who are really smart and bright and they're able to master the whole subject of drones and the technology just don't manage to finish their degree. And I think it hurts them. It just hurts them. So I would love to see some encouragement in that direction. I think I read when I first joined the board, I think it was the NF National Fire, what you know better than I do. NFPA, is that the name of the group?
Yes.
That put out what the future of firefighting should look like, and they recommended bachelor's degree for all captains. And I think it's the kind of thing that if somebody spends 5, 6, 8 years getting to the role of captain, that they have an opportunity to overcome those difficulties that many people have in terms of finishing college. But I think firefighting is a science, firefighting, and I think the more people we can have who are familiar with chemistry and physics and some of the things they encounter dealing with materials that are, toxic materials and so forth, I think it strengthens our expertise and knowledge. So I'm glad to see us doing this at the highest levels, and I would love to see it filter down to lower levels also.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. It's important. It helps with their ability to be good critical thinkers. Obviously, with the virtual environment, it's made it that much easier to be able to get those things, your degrees, without having to go to a brick and mortar class. And when I talk to new firefighters, and they're always asking about a path, I'm like, go to college, go to a 4-year college, get a degree, any degree. I don't care if it's art history or chemistry or psychology. Just go something that helps you be a good critical thinker, and it's a little bit of life and growing up. But thank you for your comments, Director.
Any comments from any other board members? Oh, I just had one more comment to just mention. At one point, and I think we interrupted this, but there was a plan, and I think this is why it's so important that we hear from you, Chief, about kind of the structure that you foresee for the district. We were kind of top heavy in division chiefs, and we only had the 3 battalion chiefs. And what the previous chief recommended is that we get more battalion chiefs, and he was going to get down to 1 or perhaps 2 division chiefs. And but they had to retire first. Well, things happened where we got the battalion chiefs, but we didn't get the retirements from the division chiefs, and then we still had the positions as being open positions. So I hope you will look at that. I think when you look at other departments, I think we have a lot more officers than most departments of our size. And I would like you to take a look at that. Just in terms of what's the right number before we replace something that we don't need to replace. I think we ought to know what the right number is and what the role should be.
Right. Well, yeah. And I will say, whether we have the right number of battalion chiefs or not, I mean, it's hard to really put my finger on, but I will say in general, the division chiefs are the ones that get the majority of the administrative work done. They're the ones that make our organization run. So it may seem sometimes if you look at that, like we seem top heavy, but it's like all the oars are in the water with those folks that are in the division chief roles. And we're just trying to focus on the areas that are most important to us, but nobody is suffering from a lack of work, that's for sure. But yeah, and I understand the other things with our staffing levels. And obviously we have 6 battalion chiefs right now. I think in comparison to some other departments, it's a little richer than some, depending on what happens with our community and a return to work in the whole Facebook or Meta complex. I mean, we've seen the challenges that the traffic brings during the busy day. So it's very helpful for us to have a battalion chief east and west on either side of the freeway when it comes to emergency response. So, but I'll look at it critically, and I'll look at some of the division chief positions too, and evaluate them. Sometimes it's through attrition, evaluating whether or not it's appropriately classified as a division chief spot. But the current division chief test will allow us to fill that operations chief that Chief Coyle is temporarily in right now. And then a deputy chief spot is just, from my perspective, a necessary person to help with the organization and the running of the organization, as we previously discussed. The day-to-day operations are in theory usually run by a deputy chief. But the fire chief doing a variety of other things other than, giving that specific day-to-day guidance. But that's kind of the plan. And then obviously the board's been incredibly helpful with rounding out the organizational structure with that administrative services director. Again, my hope is that we are able to capture a person that's able to take that higher 30,000 foot perspective and guide those individual divisions. We have in our divisions with HR and finance and the others, we have really competent practitioners that aren't always necessarily looking forward for a vision. So it will be helpful for us to have that person in there. Like you said, it will keep us kind of straight and honest, in some respects, and give us a civilian perspective on our executive staff team. But that's really without giving you a formal structure right here, that's the vision for what I have of the organization moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other comments? Board comments then from the public? Any public comment on this item?
Anyone has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And I see none, Director Bernstein.
Okay, I will move then to item number 9, which is discuss development and district water requirements.
Should be our Fire Marshal, John Johnston. Still with us?
Here.
Okay.
I cannot turn my video on though.
So again, this one I think came up as a result. There was an article in one of our newspapers recently about a large water tank potentially being approved for a development project, and it created some questions about the process and some other concerns. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I think it's probably going to be more of a conversation between the board and John on how these things work. How does it work with the community? There was questions about whether neighbors like it, what we generally do. I'll start by allowing John to explain what we do when we have a development going in and how we meet our water flow requirements and other safety needs.
Just real quickly, so I actually am listening to the City of East Palo Alto Council meeting right now too. They're actually discussing that specific item to see if they want to approve it or move it along or not. But basically,
let me interrupt you a second. I could go through some other agenda items if you'd prefer and come back to you if you'd like to do this out of order so you can listen.
no, I already got most of the items. I submitted a letter to the city manager, so I made sure our comments were there, so we're good.
Okay.
So just real quick, basically any project that would like to build We have two things that are fundamental to any project for us to be able to start approval process. Number one is access, that we can have access to the project to provide any type of aid that we need to give to them. And then the second is water, so that we can effectively put out a fire. And it is up to the project to demonstrate how they are able to meet that access, to be able to get our engines there, and then also be able to demonstrate that they can meet the minimum requirement of the California Fire Code and our local ordinance for water that is required for that project. Through that, they can either show that they meet it through whoever the municipal water purveyor is, if they provide that through the current hydrant system, or just like if you're out in a very rural area where there is no water, then the project would need to provide the water themselves, whether that's through a variety of ways of, a well that can provide it, a pump system, and or a storage tank that would be able to have the minimum amount of water. Here in our district, most projects are able to meet that through the water purveyor. However, if they are deficient in any ways, then we are able to work with that builder to find mitigations. That may mean a higher type of construction, which lowers that water requirement. They may have to change the size of their building, or similar to like IKEA and some other projects, they actually have the water that they are deficient in, and they have it as stored water tanks. And that is available to the sprinkler systems, the standpipe systems, and also to the fire department for use for firefighting purposes. And that is what we have the ability to require in regards to water meeting the needs per the California Fire Code. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Go ahead, Robert. Robert, you're on mute.
Sorry. So, Chief Johnson, when it comes to water and water capacity, you mentioned you threw out IKEA as an example of having a huge water tank. What about projects that may not, companies or buildings that may not be as as big as IKEA? Because I'm looking at some areas where the aging pipes that are currently in the ground and existing, and that ties back into water flow. How does the district interface with cities and developers in terms of those kind of improvements, or requiring or insisting? Does it fall into the access? The first item you mentioned that the fire district need access to the site, as well as, and the second item was to the district need water. So who would that fall on? Would it fall on the developer for that water capacity, or would it fall on the city to be able to provide that?
So ultimately, if a builder wants to be able to build, they have to demonstrate that water. And if they're deficient, then it's going to be up to them. It is not up to the city or the water purveyor to do that. And so it is up to that builder. So if they can't meet it, again, they can change construction types, reduce the size of their building, or not build at all. What we do is multiple things. We actually work with each of the cities on their general plans, and so that we're able to have elements within their general plans that talk about their future infrastructure and commitments that could be in there. They also have water master plans that they're required to continually update, and we are able to provide input into those water master plans. East Palo Alto is actually, and Menlo Park have been really good partners with us in that. And that actually allowed a lot of the infrastructure improvements in Menlo Park's M2 area. And there's large improvements that are taking place where the future Facebook Meta in O'Brien is taking place. The city of East Palo Alto, I just learned yesterday, approved $7 million of water main improvements that will be working in the city, and they're going to be working in 5-year increments. So I'm excited that, they are going to be working on improvements so that they can build in the future, or allow a better infrastructure for building with their general plans.
Thank you.
Rob?
Thank you, Chuck. John, I heard, and maybe you can help me with this, that these high intensity projects that are preferably in Menlo Park, I heard that there's only going to be one EIR, environmental impact review study, for all these locations, and they're going to combine one EIR. Is that accurate?
I do not know. There are some EIRs that will encompass a larger area, such as Menlo Park did one for that M2 area, because it makes it a lot easier for project approvals. But there are sometimes still specific projects that have to go just for modifications. But that's up to each city on what they are requiring for those projects. That is not us. We are just respondent to them.
So let's say the only way that we can comment on these would be if it's a violation of the California fire code then?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a violation. They just have to show that they actually meet it at the beginning of the planning and building submittal process. If not, then we just don't approve it. So it doesn't even get off the ground to be able to build it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John.
Yep.
John, I asked for this to be on the agenda because I live in an area where it is a potential issue. But let me ask you first, I know you weren't involved in this directly or anything, but let me ask you about the IKEA, the cistern and so forth that's in IKEA. What does the fire district do, if anything? I have to apologize. I'm a very suspicious person, so I know that IKEA had to build a cistern basically, but I never read anything about a requirement that they actually put water in it. What does the district do to ensure that actually would do something? It would help in firefighting.
Well, that is part of the requirement on the whole system design and its use. And then they are actually required by the California Fire Code to demonstrate documentation of testing and maintenance of all of their life safety systems. And so with our annual inspections that we do, they provide all of that documentation, and we do inspections that show that those systems are still functional.
So you actually look in the cistern and determine that there's water in it and so forth.
There's a big giant gauge on the outside. You can drive through it and see it any day you want.
Okay, well, that's reassuring. I'm sorry. I just wanted to, I mean, it's such an obvious question, but I just wasn't sure. The other thing I wanted to ask you is about the timing of this. What triggered is, I think it was a week ago Thursday or 2 weeks ago Thursday, there was an article in the Daily Post about Woodland Park Apartments doing they're tripling or quadrupling the number of apartments there. And they're going to solve this. They've bought an empty lot and they're going to put a 1 million gallon, water tank on it or something like that. And it's going to be 36 feet high in the end. And I don't live in that part of East Palo Alto or anything, but I'm not sure people are going to approve a 36-foot high water tower in the middle of their community. Where does the district, in other words, what happens if the district does the plan, approves the plans, but then the community doesn't approve the actual building of it? At what point
Well, we're never in that position. It only goes the other way around. The cities have to approve for the project to actually move forward in a planning concept aspect before anything would ever be able to be allowed to be submitted. So we typically will work with developers and the cities in regards to that. So that example that you just gave, the city right now is working to, and the council members are going to vote whether or not they want to allow that planning approval to go through. But I've been in works with the city and that developer for 2 years on that. But how it works with the city, if it's part of the city infrastructure, then I have no say on it, which is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping it will be a city community benefit and it benefits the entire community. That's what we've been trying to promote. But if in the end the city doesn't want that, then it will be entirely property owned and it will benefit that structure only. And then we will have the entire ownership of that, and it will be constructed in accordance to California fire code laws when it comes to that. We were actually very successful with the partnership with the city of East Palo Alto with the Light Tree Partners, where they have a water tank and a pump that they built that right now it is only benefiting the Light Tree apartments. But once the city of East Palo Alto builds the infrastructure down there and they are able to obtain the water in the fire hydrants alone, then there's a written agreement that water tank and pump will be turned over to the city of East Palo Alto and it will now be a community benefit. And that was something that we were all able to work out together. And because emergency water storage, increased water pressures with the volumes is something that we're all seeking to achieve. And it's great when it's a community benefit instead of all one-offs that only benefit themselves.
One of the questions that came up at the council meeting was, could other people tie into the water system that was being designed again just for Woodland Park? And so my question is, if it's designed to serve Woodland Park, but other people are granted access to it, do you have to resize the project so that it actually can serve a larger community?
If it ends up only being for that building and it's meeting the fire code requirements and it's dedicated to the life safety of that building, then we are the only ones who will have access, and that building will be the only ones that will have access to it. And it will not have any means to be tied into any other system. If it is something that gets built with a community benefit, then it will be part of the city system and it'll be able to benefit all. And that will not be under our jurisdiction.
But it would be sized accordingly to how many people it serves, or how many buildings it serves and so forth.
Correct. I'm looking for, a community benefit overall that would benefit everything there.
And some people have suggested that by building a water tank instead of expanding the underground water pipes and so forth, it's actually hurting the infrastructure, or at least it's not helping the infrastructure be further developed. What are your thoughts about that?
I actually disagree, because there's two things that you need. One is you need available water. And then two, you need to be able to get it from point A to point B. And that's part of the problem with the city of East Palo Alto is the pipes are undersized in those commercial areas. So yes, they have plenty of water, but it's on paper and they can't get it from point A to point B. And what the fire district needs is volume. It's not really pressure that we're dealing with all the time. It's volume. So when they build this storage tank, it can, or any type of storage tank, it'll meet the city's desire to have emergency water supplies, but it also puts volume in a static aspect that will benefit the communities. And then the infrastructure is going to get built anyways, which is larger pipe sizes to be able to get that water from point A to point B, which will benefit the community and benefit the larger projects and meet the fire district's fire flow requirements.
Okay. And then just one last question about this tank that I'm talking about, 36 feet up in the air. What kind of design constraints are being put on it in terms of seismic safety and things like that? What does it have to withstand, or what does it have to, how much of an earthquake does it have to be able to withstand?
Whatever the minimum California codes that are applicable of whatever jurisdiction it falls under.
That would be building code, or who determines that?
Well, if it falls under the water purveyor, then all of the government laws and regulations that they fall under for construction. If it ends up being under the fire department, then it'll fall under our building requirements, which would be the California Building Code and Fire Code.
I see.
And they're, so,
Okay.
and yes, there is a lot of seismic factors that come into play for the state of California.
Okay, well, that was very helpful. There's just lots of neighbors who are asking about it and wondering whether they're gonna get flooded when it tips over and things like that. So it helps to understand that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions from board members about this? And let me ask then for public comment. Any public comment or questions for our guest?
Anyone has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in.
I see a hand from Susan.
Yes,
Can you give her
I'm
access?
working on it. Thank you. Susan, I think you can.
Yes, thank you very much to the directors and Mr. Johnston. My concern with this water tank is that right now we're in the middle of a drought, and I'm sort of hesitant about the building right now. And even if we get enough water this year, would it be enough for the building to go forward? And the other question is, every time, if they do a job, does that mean they have to build more tanks, water tanks, in order to supply what they need? That's something I would like clarified. Thank you.
If you want me to answer that, so basically, the water tanks would be sized for the project, if it's going to be for the project specific only. But what we are trying to work on is something that would benefit the community as a whole with the city. And so it would meet emergency water supplies. And we're actually looking at the aspect of, if there is a large scale emergency, that you'd have enough water to hopefully to be able to meet a day or so of emergency water needs within the city after an earthquake, so that we can put out fires and prevent a conflagration. However, the intent of the California Fire Code is specifically for us to be able to contain and put a single building fire out, which would be a lot smaller tank. So our goal is initially with the one building, but we are trying to do something that would benefit the community as a whole. And the drought, while it is a issue for the state, the city still has its water availability and rights, and whether the water is sitting in that tank or under the ground, it's the same water that's there.
John, this tank that we're talking about on Donahoe, I think, it would be supplied by the Hetch Hetchy system. So what that means is if there were an earthquake that damaged the Hetch Hetchy pipes, it's possible that the tank couldn't be refilled, but it would have enough water in it, you're saying, to fight one structure fire.
So that tank actually would be supplied by the city of East Palo Alto water. City of East Palo Alto has water purchasing rights from the Hetch Hetchy, but the city of East Palo Alto also has a well that they have to provide water within the city. So they have two sources of water at the moment. They also have interties with the city of Menlo Park and working on some other emergency interties, so that in the event that they have some water failures, that they'd be able to obtain it through other means and needs. And I know City of Menlo Park is also working on that, so that they're not dependent on one supply source of water.
In terms of our district in general, it sounds like you're fairly confident that our water situation from a firefighting standpoint is adequate, and we're okay in general. Is that correct?
I'm going to say I'm confident that we have systems that have lasted a long time, and the areas where they failed, we've seen a lot of repairs, and they've been built to modern standards, and they are improving when it comes to emergency supplies. I do not believe we have enough emergency supply, but we do know that after an earthquake, the greatest amount of damage actually comes from fires. And so it's going to be a matter of, the efficiency and means to be able to address those fires immediately and see where that stands currently. But by having these partnerships, I think that's the best thing that we can be doing with each of these water departments, by having multiple sources of water. But I will say, I do know that the fire district is prepared by being aware of all of our static water supplies and knowing, where we can go to obtain water if needed in a large scale disaster.
Any other comments from the public?
I see none, Director Bernstein.
Okay. John, thank you very much. It was very informative, very interesting. I think people who've had concerns would be reassured by it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and just so you know, my office is open anytime. If you want to be able to ask questions or go take a tour of some of that stuff, I'm more than happy to, help you gain some confidence in the systems that we have too.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let's move then to our next item number 10, which is the chief reporting on our accreditation program.
Thank you, Director and board members. Kind of an update and also a request from me to push pause on the accreditation program. So this has been to the Strategic Planning Committee twice. The first time they asked me to come back to them with basically an inventory of where we are in the accreditation process, where we think we'd be successful, where we think we wouldn't be. And so myself and primarily Chief Navarro went through all of the different criteria and requirements and came up with a pretty comprehensive and honest assessment of where we are. So right now we find ourselves at a point in time when we think it would be prudent to push pause. Two things are leading us there right now. First of all is our outstanding management audit with AP Triton is, in my hope, is going to unearth or reveal some areas that we could improve on that might end up being barriers currently for us to be successful in the process, should we continue to move forward with it. And then secondly, the timing just feels right also with Chief Navarro's announced retirement at the end of the year. It's just a good time for us to gather back up, take a pause, and see what the management audit has to share with us. The attachment to the report is, in essence, Chief Navarro's assessment of the accreditation process. It kind of gives us a roadmap too. So if we decide to pick it back up and pursue it, we know where we need to. We've got the assessment manual that's mostly complete. And probably the most important thing is, I know we've been going down this process for a number of years, is that it hasn't been a waste of time and money for us to go down this process. The list of things that we've been able to do and accomplish in the meantime to make us a better organization, to work on continuous self-improvement, are pretty significant. And as Chief Navarro has assessed, that we're likely 60% compliant on the core competencies, and then there's the other 40% is where we have either some or some substantial needs for improvement. A lot of it also revolves around us having internal processes for setting goals and objectives, going back annually or on an annual basis and reviewing them. Same thing with programmatic goals. We don't currently have any of those things in place where we actually do that review. It was an interesting question that came from strategic planning from Director McLaughlin. He goes, I think his question was, well, do you intend to? And my plan is, regardless of whether we go through the actual formal accreditation process, I do plan at the beginning of each year is to sit down and set some, I'll call them strategic goals or annual goals. And at the end of each year to take a look back and measure them, measure our success, report out, things like that. So there's been a lot learned and a lot gained through the process. But like I said, at this time, it's my recommendation that we push pause, doesn't harm us, doesn't cause us to have to start all over again. If we were to submit to the peer review team now, we would likely be unsuccessful, and then we would truly have to restart the entire process. So pushing pause just means that if at some point in time we want to take it back up, we just have to register and we can keep moving forward with the documentation and processes that we already have in place. So with that, I know it's getting late. What I'll do is, like I said, that's my request, to allow us to push pause on the accreditation process, and I'll open it to questions. Director.
Thank you. Board members want to comment or weigh in on the chief's proposal to pause the accreditation process?
I have one question, Chief. In pushing pause, I'm all for that. If you feel like, hey, we need to just kind of regroup. But is there, I know there's over the last, 4 or 5 years, been a lot of work put into the accreditation program. And if we were to kind of pick it back up at some point down the road, is there a point of no return in that, with that, in terms of if we wait a year, put it on pause for a year, would there be any consequences for waiting so long to pick it back up, or do we just start where we left off, or do we have to do it all over again?
No, so the one thing that's changed is from there's this 9th edition manual that we've been working out of. They've updated it to a 10th. So we would need to refresh all of the data to be compliant with the 10th edition, which we'd have to do anyway if we pursued it right now. So there's no consequence with that. I would imagine that at some point in time, it would be like we would be starting all over again. I think it would be many years of pausing rather than just 1 year. So I don't have a definitive answer as to what that amount of time would be, but and I think probably what would be reasonable is for us to revisit this a year from now, and or maybe shorter period of time, and collectively come together and see if as a board and that's something that's of interest to us.
With Manny's report, Chief Navarro report, I mean, I read through it and it seemed like there's a lot of work has been put into this particular document, just looking at the bullet points that he highlighted. So, I appreciate Manny for bringing it to this point in terms of at least being able to kind of have things, like you said, there where it's clear where things have been left off and where you need to just pick up from.
I totally concur. Chief Navarro has done a lot of heavy lifting and has left us a really good roadmap for if and when we pick it back up.
I would like to make a comment on it. I first of all will say that I think if the chief wants to pause it, I think we need to pause, and I think it's there's just no reason to. I mean, it seems like we're not going to be successful right now, and to go in just to prove that we're not successful proves nothing. So to embarrass ourselves, I think, would be a mistake. So pausing seems like the right answer. But we've put $2 million into this project, and to come up with a dry hole after an investment of $2 million, sure, we've perhaps gained something, but I'm frankly embarrassed, one, by the amount of money that we've spent on it, and two, by the fact that we cannot match our some of our neighboring agencies in being an exemplary fire agency or whatever. And it's one of the things that I hope we're on the other side of now. So this idea, we've been patting ourselves on the back for the last 10 years about how great we are and how wonderful we do things. But some of the flaws that are pointed out in this report in terms of not having goals and not involving stakeholders and things. I mean, this is just something that just cries out poor management. And I hope we're turning the corner on this. I hope that we continue to kind of perhaps do some weeding among our staff and get staff who are able to do these things. I complained about it earlier in the meeting where I felt like the board wasn't getting good information, but I think that's, Virginia said this, a large extent, the board is to blame for this, and I'll take some blame myself. I think I should have asked for more, and I frankly let kind of district staff pull the wool over my eyes a little too long and so forth. And there's an issue of whether the board micromanages things. But I think the board has been kind of too distant from this, particularly when it comes to the issue of setting goals and then holding people accountable to those goals. So I think we have learned some important things, and what, regardless of whether we were accredited or not, the fact is we identified some shortcomings, and I hope that this management audit will help point out some of those and will help create a roadmap for improvement, because we have not had good management. We've had some very weak people in a number of areas, and it never stopped us from patting ourselves on the back and saying how superb everything was. But that, in fact, was not the truth. And I think the truth hurts. It hurts to hear that we didn't cut the mustard when it came to being accredited. From my standpoint, it's made me want to improve the agency. Whether that means getting accredited or not, I don't know. But I mean, it may not be worth going forward with that. But if we do improve what we're doing, I think we can become an exemplary agency. It's just very disappointing to know that we are not an exemplary agency right now. And I'm embarrassed about that. And I'm embarrassed that I didn't push harder in the past. So it's made me, I think I was a little bit more obstreperous tonight than I normally am. And I think I'm demanding more of staff than I normally did. And I think, yeah, I'm probably going to end up being a little bit more micromanager as a result of this, because I think letting ourselves be distant and not get involved in what was really going on, I think was a problem. And I think this points out the problem that was. So anyway, I support the chief's recommendation at this point as well. Are there other comments? Anybody'd like to? If not right now, I'll come back to it. I'll go to the public again. Are there any public comment on this item on the accreditation?
As a reminder, if anyone has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in.
Yeah, Chuck.
Let me just, Rob, let me just make sure there's no one from the public, and then I'll come to you, okay?
And
Sure.
there are no raised hands. Director Bernstein, you may continue.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, what we discussed in the strategic planning meeting in lieu of this accreditation process was our ISO rating. And the chief said that he would look into that and attempt to raise our ISO rating from a class 2, which is what we have now, to a class 1. And there's a lot of areas that we have definitely improved on. So I think now the focus point is going to be on our management inspection audit, and secondly, raising our ISO rating. Isn't that right, Chief?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's our hope. I think we've scrutinized the ISO review from whatever it was 5 years ago. So yeah, our goal is really to try and spend time and energy and money on things that
That are gonna,
actually
exactly, yeah, I
improve
agree.
us improve us and make us better, and not just that give us a certificate that we can put on the wall. So, I think there's a lot of really great and wonderful ideas that this accreditation agency has. I'd like to steal all the good ones and leave all the ones that don't have value to us alone, but we'll figure it out. But separately, the ISO rating is, I think, something that has value for us and our constituents because of insurance rates. And like I said, we would like to target and focus on things that we have, immediate good value for our constituents. So that will be our focus. And we have one of our very best staffers on that, John Johnston, who you can tell is very competent in those areas. So I've put him in charge of our ISO review process. It's going to come up soon.
Thank you, Chief.
Virginia, did you want to make a comment?
No, I think I've said enough.
Okay, well, Chief, would you like a vote of the board, or do you, I think you seem to, there seems to be a consensus that pause is the right answer here. Any need for a vote on that?
I will defer to Steve Miller on whether we need a vote or not, but I've heard your direction.
No need for a vote to satisfy me.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, board.
Could we let the minutes reflect, please, Michelle, that the consensus of the board was to pause?
It's noted.
Recommended.
It's noted. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, let me get caught up here. So, number 11 is the future of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Ad Hoc Committee. And that is mine. I provided really just as advance notice to the board. So you got a memo from me late today. My recommendation, I heard nothing more after our last meeting from anybody else on the board. There was no energy or advice or encouragement to do anything further with the committee. I think the committee has served the district well. It's made some recommendations. It's helped define the problems that we're facing. And I think it's elicited from the district staff a commitment to take a hard look at our employment practices, our recruitment, our training, and our promotion policies and so forth. I was told by the chief, and I hope I'm reporting it correctly, Chief, that you expected in November to be able to present ideas on your plans in that regard. Am I correct?
That's accurate. Yes.
Okay. So I think we've got the agency moving. It's the first time, as far as I know, and that this issue of our hiring practices and so forth is being examined, and so I think we made a lot of progress. I'm grateful to both Robert and Virginia for serving on it. And my recommendation to the board is that we dissolve the committee for the time being. In theory, ad hoc committees are supposed to have a limited life and to terminate once their immediate reason for being is accomplished. And I think that's where we are. And so that would be my recommendation, that we do nothing further on this. But I will open that up to board members for their comments and either concurrence or not. Any comments on that?
I want to say something. It saddens my heart to know that the author of this particular committee, along with our person that's left on the committee, could not muster up enough energy to continue to work on the DEI work. There is competent staff for sure, but DEI is not just for having competent staff. It's also having the leadership from the board, in addition to working along with staff. Because it's not just, oh, you guys do it and just tell us about it. Everybody should be jumping into the same tub here, looking at this particular thing. And it just is unfortunate that you express it in a way that there was nobody else interested in moving it forward. And that scares me, because if the chief and the staff come up with recommendation that you don't understand, that I wonder whether there will be a confirmation from the board on moving forward. That's what scares me the most about your comments, and where the work of DEI will ultimately end up.
Okay. Other board comments? Rob, Virginia, anything?
Yeah, I'll say something. I actually agree with Robert in many ways, and I don't even know what to say. I mean, I think that however we move forward with DEI in the future, it has to start at the top. And we have to look at ourselves as a board to figure out, what it is that we can do to overcome any kind of implicit biases or whatever you want to call it. But I thank Robert for doing a lot of work. I mean, his leadership on this committee has been tremendous. And I learned a lot from him, and I hope he learned something from me, but I really think that with Robert's life and experiences, we all as a board could have learned a lot. And Francine, I want to thank you as well for working with us, you and the chief, Mark. I mean, one of the reasons that attracted me to hire you is your work that you did with the Museum of Tolerance down in Ventura County. And I just hope that, even though this committee is no longer going to exist right now, that doesn't mean that the work, should be stopped, or at least we have a cultural shift at some point, just to at least just start with, looking at ourselves. So thank you, Francine and Chief. Y'all have done a lot. And Robert, thank you too. I've learned a lot from you.
Chuck?
Yes, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. I definitely want to thank the committee. It's brought up many factors that we need to look at as an organization. And it's kind of just, we're just opening the door. We're starting. The chief and his staff are going to look into this. It brought to the attention to the staff just on the recruitment and retention aspect. And there are other areas too that need to be addressed. And it's just the beginning. And I see a good interaction between not only the community, ourselves, and the board, but just the services that we do provide here for our community. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Rob. Any other board comments? Let me go then to the public. Any comment on? I do see a hand from Gary Bloom. Michelle, can you bring him into the meeting? Michelle, are you there? You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Bloom is available to speak now.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. I'm assuming all of you can hear me, and I know that most of you know that I'm a candidate for the board. So I'm a little hesitant to even comment until I'm on the board itself. But I just think this is a really important topic. And having listened to the discussion at the last meeting, having had a chance to talk to the chief about, his plans and his guidance to the district to, put a great deal of focus on it, I'm pretty confident that a lot of good outcomes will come from the effort. With that said, I think this is a terrible missed opportunity to send a really strong message to the community and a really strong message to every employee in the district about how important this topic is. And from my experience having dealt with this down at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where I'm on the President's Advisory Cabinet down there, I know that sustained focus from the very top of the management team is directly is key to it, but making sure that the constituents that support that organization and the boards and leadership that are over the top of them are sharing the goal of diversity, equity, inclusion is critically important. So I just think you're missing an opportunity. And I think, like I said, I could take it as an opportunity and say, if you actually messaged the district and the employees, it'd be very positive. I can look at it as a negative that says the fact you're abandoning the committee is a really bad optic when it comes to both the community and the district employees. So I think you can look at it the positive or the negative, but either way, I think this particular decision by the board, from my lens at least, is a mistake.
Any other public comment on this item?
Anyone else has public comment? Please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you call in. I see none, Director Bernstein.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're now at the point where we're moving into our committee reports.
Well, wait, are we voting on this, or, I mean, you just made a recommendation. Do we need to vote on the recommendation or not?
I don't know. I didn't put it on as an action item, as simply a discussion item. Basically,
Right, but you made the recommendation to dissolve it. So if that's an action.
well,
I
okay.
mean, are you, I don't
Go
know,
ahead,
Steve,
go
help
ahead.
me out here. Is it the president has the prerogative to do that? Probably. I'm just want to make sure that we're clear on exactly what it is that's happening now.
So it's not 100% crystal clear in your policies. I think the practice is that the board president may appoint ad hoc committees and appoint board members to serve on ad hoc committees. Your policy is not clear expressly about the president's power to dissolve an ad hoc committee. As Director Bernstein indicated, ad hoc committees have a limited lifespan by definition. Plus, under these circumstances, there is one member of a committee, which really is not a committee. And so absent any action by the, I'm not sure that anything will happen. Having said all that, if the will of the board as expressed through a majority, if someone wants to make a motion and you want to vote to expressly enable this committee to do something or expressly appoint members to it, a majority of the board certainly has that power. So doing nothing, I think this committee of one will sort of naturally expire, but you could certainly take action to stop that from happening if you wanted to. That answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
Would you like to make a motion, Virginia?
I mean, I would like the committee to continue, but, I think that the two people involved, Robert and I are, we were doing good work, and I don't think that we can do this without board support, which I don't think we had. We had staff support and we had the chief support. So I don't know. I mean, I would love to continue to have the ad hoc committee, but, I don't know how anyone else feels. I mean, I'll make the motion to continue with the ad hoc committee. And if I get a second, if we want to discuss it, that's fine. If not, then, your recommendation will stand as the board president. So I'll make a motion to just continue to have the ad hoc, DEI ad hoc committee.
Well, for the sake of the discussion and so forth, I will second it. And then I'd just like to ask you a question. I had asked previously if you were willing to continue on the committee. And you told me that if Robert didn't continue, you didn't want to continue either. But if you would
Well, I
like,
mean, it doesn't make sense to have a committee of one person, Chuck. It's illogical and
I
it-
wasn't talking about a committee of one person. I was just asking you about you continuing. Are you willing to continue?
yeah, but I mean, I really want, I'm not gonna speak for Robert. I'm not gonna, try to bind him into anything, but I just think that it worked as it was. And so, and I don't want Robert to feel pressured to be the decision maker on this. I mean, because I think at the end of the day, we didn't have enough board support, and I think that makes it very difficult, especially on this topic, for us to continue the work in a meaningful way with staff.
Robert, go ahead, please.
I agree with Mr. Bloom that this is such an important topic, an area that I think that really do think the district, and this is taking nothing away from staff, but it's hopefully it's a compliment for the interest and fortitude by staff to want to continue to look at this particular area and within our district. And I'm with Virginia. One person can do it, but it really, two board members will send a very strong message, I think, that there is board commitment around this area. And since there hasn't been any other board member to want to step in or step up to continue this work in this particular area, as long as any of us are around, that if board members find it appropriate enough for me to step in with Virginia, I will be happy to do that because it is a lifelong passion of mine in so many ways. And for many of you, you really don't understand the impact in our community with lost opportunities that could be gained by, in so many ways, they help the district out in terms of the complaint that I hear about not finding people in our community that's closer to the fire district that could be drawn upon. Only because in my community, that effort has not been formalized in a way to recruit individuals, not only in the area that I live, but in the South County as a whole. So I think there are opportunities that it's a lot of work left to be done. And if the board so choose and think that I'm worthy to sit on the committee, I would gladly continue that work with Virginia. I don't have to be the chairperson. Virginia could be the chairperson. It doesn't matter. The work needs to be done, and it needs to come from the highest level in this district, and that is the board.
So I can amend my motion. I can amend my motion to have the the DEI committee, reinstated with the original committee members of Director Jones and me. If there's a second to that.
Well, I was the second, and I certainly would concur or maintain my second. I mean, I made a a sincere plea to both of you to continue. And I said it in public, that I was hoping I could change the direction of this, and I said it in private to both of you. And I felt that there was work to still do, but without your willingness, and I appreciate the change in direction here potentially, because I think it would be wonderful if both of you would continue, and you've made that motion. Robert's agreed to continue. And it was my idea to have this committee in the first place. It was something that I thought was important, and I think it is something that there should be some both energy behind it and oversight behind it on a continuing basis. So I've always felt that, but I did not feel that I was the right person to be providing that direction. And I think that the two of you are the right people to be doing that. So I think that would be terrific. So I support that wholeheartedly. I've seconded the motion.
Well, I made the amended motion, Chuck, to just have the original committee members back on.
Right, and I amended my second to concur.
Okay.
So, if you would like to continue, that again has always been my first choice. It's what I tried to do for a month, and I was not successful up to last meeting. And I think it's a wonderful turn of direction right now. So hooray. We'll do a vote on this, but I do appoint the committee members, but it's with the assent of the board members, so it is appropriate to vote on that. Any further discussion on this? Okay.
I would like to thank the member of the public for making the comment as well.
Michelle, would you conduct the roll call vote, please?
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin is absent, Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. The motion carries 4-0 with Director McLaughlin absent. And so we have a reconstituted committee. I would just ask, and it would be great if we could resolve it now, about the chairmanship of it. Robert, the person that I originally appointed as chair. Robert, I don't know if you want to continue in that role as chair, or if you would like
Well,
to.
I mean, do we have to make that decision now? Is that something Robert and I can discuss?
I'm happy with you discussing it, but I
Thank
think
you.
we do need to announce it as part of the committee, constitution. So will you contact me after you've discussed it?
Sure, one of us will.
Okay, that would be terrific.
Excuse me, Director Bernstein, if I could also request that the ad hoc committee at its first meeting prepare a plan consistent with the status of an ad hoc committee with a limited duration or limited scope. And if it turns out that that's inappropriate, it might be worth discussing whether it should be converted to a standing committee that is subject to Brown Act rules, depending on what you decide is the scope and duration of the committee.
What you're speaking of is like a work plan. I mean, what the goals might be and how long it would take to accomplish them?
An ad hoc committee, by definition, has a limited purpose, and when that limited purpose is complete, the committee disbands. And from what I've just heard from the conversation, it sounds like there may not be such a limited purpose of we're going to prepare a report in 6 months and that'll be the end of it. But it may be that there's more ongoing jurisdiction of this committee, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not opining whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's totally fine. It's just if it is an ongoing committee, it will become a standing committee because it will continue in existence without a finite scope. So I just think that issue should be resolved by the committee at its first meeting.
Okay. Is Virginia and Robert, you've heard Stephen's request here?
Yes.
Clear. It's
Okay,
clear.
well, thank you. I'm glad you'll be doing this, and I look forward to hearing back from you about how you will organize yourself in terms of a chair on this, so we can announce it at the next meeting. Okay, let's then go to our regular committee reports, item 12, human resources, emergency preparedness. Is whose committee is emergency prepared? Is that
No report.
okay? And then this next one is human resources. Rob?
Yeah, we discussed those three classifications and it's going back to committee. So we've kicked that around a bit, Chuck. Thank you.
Okay. Jim McLaughlin sent me his committee report by email, so I will read it. Chief Lorenzen provided the committee with a status report on the accreditation project. At the committee's request, Chief Navarro prepared a review of progress made to date to attain accreditation. While the district was in compliance with the majority of established standards, there are several it is not. The areas of non-compliance are generally in the area of organizational structure and administration. Specifically, the district does not have a compliance strategic plan, and a performance evaluation improvement process for several administrative functions needs to be developed. Chief Lorenzen recommended the accreditation process be suspended until these issues can be resolved. After discussing all the issues, Directors McLaughlin and Solano concurred with Chief Lorenzen's recommendation. The Strategic Planning Committee recommends the board approve suspension of the accreditation effort at this time. So that is what occurred. And then the Finance Committee, Virginia.
Yeah, we approved everything tonight, so I'm glad we have the fund balance policy done.
Okay. I'll move to item 13, the reports and requests, liaison reports, the town of Atherton. And again, Jim McLaughlin sent me his report that he had nothing to report. City of East Palo Alto is mine, and I also have nothing to report, but I was looking into some of the things that relate to the interface between the fire district and the city itself. And that's one of the reasons that that the fire marshal, John Johnston, was here tonight to provide some background on some of that. And City of Menlo Park, that's you, Virginia.
Yes, sorry about that. We, as Chief Lorenzen said, have our meeting scheduled for October 20th. I'm going to reiterate the 4 agenda items that Councilmember Ray Mueller and I proposed to put on the agenda. I don't know, Chief, if you've heard from the city manager about what he wanted, but the 4 items were 1, introduction of Chief Lorenzen to the city council, which would be our item. 2 is updates and status on the Station 1 zoning, which would be the city's item. 3 would be the OEM update / community preparedness update, which would be our item. And 4, which is fire protection and prevention update, particularly regarding the Sharon Heights Golf and Country Club. And that would be the city's item. So I have not heard from anyone else, Chief. I'm not sure if you've met with the city manager about potential items as well, but these are the items that we've proposed to go on to the agenda for the October 20th meeting.
Yeah, I have not chatted with Justin recently. I will check in with him and see if he has anything he wants added or any concerns on them. I know there's one of the items that one of his council members added could, there might be some challenges with that. I mean, it's really related to the Station 1 zoning, but if they want to chat about it, that's certainly something we can do. I'll tie back in with you, Director Crawley.
Okay, but those are the four that we've proposed. I think it covers a lot of issues.
And I just want to note for everybody's benefit that that meeting is scheduled for October 20th at 5 o'clock. It's still not clear to me whether it's a virtual meeting or an in-person meeting, and I'm hoping to get a word from Michelle when she knows what it is.
Oh, so I thought it was in person with the option to zoom in.
Oh, okay, I will write that down. I didn't know that. Okay, thank you. And then County of San Mateo, Districts 3 and 4, Rob?
Nothing to report, Jeff.
Okay. And the San Mateo Pre-Hospital Emergency Medical Joint Powers Authority. That's June.
Yes. So we
Okay.
were supposed to have our quarterly meeting tomorrow, September 21st, and we got an email about a week or two ago, and that meeting's been canceled. So, and I don't even know why. I mean, I spoke with the chair of the elected bodies, or the body made up of elected representatives from different cities and fire districts, and she mentioned that they had just not done the work. So I actually have to go back and listen to the video, because I was assured that they were not going to cancel that based on some of the things that they were going to bring back, but clearly that's the case, which means, unfortunately, for the public and the county, that out of, 4 meetings in a year, because these are quarterly, we've only had 2, which is disappointing. So our next meeting is going to be in January of 2023. So if you're having 50%, I'm not even, do we have 50? I'm not even sure we had 50% of the meetings. I think I've only been to 1. So probably 25% of the meetings. So I'll keep everyone posted, but I'm really not happy with the direction of, the staff and of the JPA and the elected bodies not taking seriously, the need to discuss ambulance service.
Thank you. Item 14, the ad hoc committee reports. I'll assume, Robert and Virginia, that there is no report from the DEI ad hoc committee. Is that a fair assumption? Okay. The water companies and water pressure.
We did not meet, Chuck.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then ambulance services, at this point, I doubt that that committee, I'll doubt that it will be active this year at all. It was an idea that was to meet a crisis at the time, but the crisis seems to have dissolved for the time being, although Virginia's report suggests that all is not well in ambulance land. So let's move then to the reports and requests of directors. I'll just go through. Virginia, do you have anything to report?
I was at a community event in East Palo Alto, and Chief, I'm not sure if you've heard this or not, but there were some residents who think that there's too much speeding on Runnymede, which is the street where Station 2 is located, and they just wanted to have me make note of the fact that they would like to have some speed bumps there, and they were told they couldn't have them, and I said I'd bring it up in the meeting tonight, and that other cities like Menlo they have speed bumps with the cutouts in them. So I don't know if you've heard anything from the city manager of East Palo Alto, but I just wanted to share that with you, and that's a concern. And maybe if the city manager, the city manager brings it up, then maybe it's something that we can talk about in the future jointly. But a few residents made that remark to me.
Okay.
That's all, Virginia?
Yes.
Okay. Rob, do you have anything to report?
No, I don't. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, Robert.
There's two events that's going to be happening this Saturday. I don't know if everybody know about it. In Menlo Park, Belhaven area, they're going to have their resource fair. It's from 10 to 2 o'clock. And in East Palo Alto, the same day, the 24th, there is a community festival, which will be from 11 to 7 p.m. There's going to be about approximately 25, 30 vendors, food trucks. There's going to be a band, and it's going to be on the Week Street property from, if you know East Palo Alto, from Pogo's down to the Bay Trails. And in Menlo Park is Belhaven area is going to be at Ivy Plaza, which is on dead end, which is on Ivy Drive in Menlo Park. So if you don't have anything to do, come out and enjoy yourself at both of them. There's going to be plenty of barbecue and plenty of food in East Palo Alto.
Thank you, Robert.
Robert, I wanted to dovetail into your second item about the East Palo Alto Festival. I had a request from an East Palo Alto resident named Jerry Chang to announce that they were hoping that the fire district would want to have some sort of a booth or information table there.
Right, they will. Carol Parker is coordinating that with the district, for the district. And so there will be a booth there that will house CERT, East Palo Alto Police, as well as the fire department.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, I called him back, but he never called me back. So I wasn't sure what the purpose of it was, but he wanted me to make that announcement at tonight's meeting. So I'm glad.
One of the developers, Harvest Properties, who's building 30, 40 unit housing development on Wheat Street, right where the festival is going to be, is joining up with Renaissance Center, as well as the Rotary for East Palo Alto, as well as the city, to put this event on.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then move to the president's report. I just had one. Well, I was going to talk about this event, but I just had one other thing. We're talking, and I don't know anything about the governor's proposal regarding meetings and remote meetings in the future, but I think almost everyone has mentioned that participation of the public in meetings has been enhanced by the ability to attend remotely. And it seems like there's an interest in us continuing to have remote access even as we return to meeting in person. And with that in mind, I was going to ask the chief if we could hire a sound consultant to make recommendations of how we could have a Zoom set up in our meeting room and have adequate sound to record or capture the director's voices and other participants' voices. I know, Chief, you weren't here, but we had a meeting with Atherton in the new Atherton City Hall, and the sound capability was just terrible. It just didn't work at all. We had a couple of people calling in, we couldn't hear them and so forth. And rather than do this at the last minute, I just thought we have perhaps a couple months before we might want to have a hybrid type of meeting with both in-person and remote participation. But we need good sound quality.
You really want to hire a sound consultant, Chuck? I mean, how much is that going to cost us? We have so many consultants. I'm not sure we need a sound consultant.
Well, if you have the technical know-how to set this up, that would be
Well, I
terrific.
mean, we have an IT department.
They might, but yeah, I'll check with internal staff. I know we have something called an owl in one of our conference rooms. It's a roving camera. I don't know how it does on audio, but we certainly can start going down that road and start doing some testing. I know Steve Miller will talk a little bit about the options at next month's meeting about what's available as far as virtual meetings for the public. And
maybe we should agendize this whole topic, because as Director Bernstein indicated, the whole purpose of this is to allow public participation. And before we start talking too much about how to do it, it should be on an agenda.
Perfect. I will have staff start looking into that, Director.
I would appreciate it, just because it was so awkward at Atherton where nobody could hear, and it's not public participation when you can't hear whoever's speaking and so forth. So it just seemed like there's a way to do it right, but somehow somebody has to be knowledgeable about that. Yeah, I don't know who that is. Maybe we go to video only and they could do it for us or something. But, okay, that constitutes my report. We're now at time for public comment number 3 on any subject. If anybody from the public would like to address any subject relating to the fire district, this would be the time to do that.
As a reminder, if you have public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And I see none. Director Bernstein.
Okay, thank you. Our next meeting is October 18th. If there are any other comments from the board before we adjourn? Any other comments from staff? Okay, we are adjourned at 11:02 on this evening. Thank you.
Good night, all.